Hi, my name is Megan Munn, and welcome to the Everydayer podcast, where I interview the everyday, resilient, and powerful human who might just be standing in line next to you at the grocery store, who pick themselves up over and over and over again, and also do the best thing ever. They turn around and they hold out their hand and they ask the next person to come with them. So I hope you enjoy their story as much as I do, and maybe you can even see a little bit of yourself in them. I'm super excited to introduce today's guest for the first episode of the Everydayer podcast. She is a very close friend of mine. Her name is Tiffany Wilkinson. And I asked her to be interviewed today because she has been a large inspiration for me over the past 2 years, just in how she carries herself, what an amazing human she is. And then this last year, she was diagnosed with lobular carcinoma in her left breast and proceeded with a double mastectomy at the beginning of the summer and cancer treatment with the Black Center out of Chicago. And then we'll be continuing her treatment course with radiation therapy after the first year. I wanted to bring Tiffany on so that she can share her story of personal resilience and to give us an idea, right, of who we have walking around every day with us, the personal battles that they face each day, and how we can use their stories to see ourselves and maybe find some strength and resilience within. I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did. Well, hello. Hello,
Hello.
Tiffany.
Hello, my friend Megan.
We've already been talking for 20 minutes. So,
Yeah,
before we
the
start recording,
conversation has been started already.
for sure, for sure. This is Tiff Wilkinson, and we've known each other for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
And I invited Tiff to be my first guest because Tiff is currently in remission and has been going through treatment for breast cancer.
hmm
And kind of the premise of this podcast, The Everydayer, is that Tiffany is a Queen Creek resident, Mesa. Is it Mesa?
I mean, technically, I live in Mesa. Yeah,
Mesa resident.
borders Queen Creek.
Mesa resident, just wandering around in everyday life, uh,
Mm.
going through this and inspiring people along the way. And she's had a life as well. That all kind of leads into who she is today and how she's processing and how she is approaching what she's dealing with. And so today we're just gonna talk about her,
Woo! It gets to be all about me.
talk about you.
Yes.
Um, Tiff, why don't we just go to, let's start with how'd you find out? What was your first day that you were like, ooh,
Yeah. So it was, well, I guess take it back a little bit. So I kind of have been down this road a little bit prior to actually getting breast cancer. So when I was 25, got found out that I had fibrous breast tissue and kind of and had like a couple little like bumps. And so had already kind of sort of been down this path. And then a little over 8 years ago, I developed a fibroid adenoma, so which is just a benign tumor, and it was in my left breast. Didn't change, just chilling, hanging out, and the end of 2023, probably late fall, going into winter, um, I felt changes, and I was like, oh, well, maybe it's just my, benign fibroid adenoma growing, because my doctors told me that that is a possibility. It can happen as you get older, get closer to, menopause age and stuff like that. So, but then it kept growing, and then there was the week in between Christmas and New Year's last year, where I knew that it wasn't my fibroid adenoma and something else was going on. And it was when my nipple actually retracted in on my left breast, and I was like, oh shit, like this is definitely not my fibroid adenoma. This has to be something else. And so, of course, in January 2024, so the beginning of this year, I get in to my
can I
OBGYN.
can I pause you right there?
Yes.
How big was what you were feeling? Like, so you had your fibroid thing, and then
Yeah.
was that still there, and there was an additional thing?
Yes, it was. So my fibroid adenoma was still there. That one was well, obviously they're gone now. So that was roughly 2 centimeters, I believe. And then, so it was actually a new tumor that was growing, that I thought was my fibroid adenoma, but nope, it was a new tumor. And I actually had a total of 3 tumors in my left breast, and then also my lymph nodes were there was a small tumor on my lymph nodes as well too. So I had a grand total of 4 tumors all hanging out between my lymph nodes and my armpit and my left breast. One of those was my fibroid adenoma.
Okay.
So January this year, go in, obviously see my OB/GYN, then he sends me off to go get a mammogram and an ultrasound. And then that's where I found out like how many of them there were. And I was sitting at Simon Med, and the radiologist is on the phone, going over the results. So I got him like right away from the mammogram and the ultrasound.
Oh,
And
dang.
yeah. And when he was telling me like how many were in there, it was one of the most wildest moments because I was like, how the fuck are that many in there? First of all,
Were you like,
I know it was just crazy. And then the one that I thought was my fibroid adenoma it was actually a pretty big tumor. So that was a hard fucking day. You hear that from the radiologist, and then I walk out, and my boyfriend Adam was with me, and I just like broke down and started crying because you're like, holy fuck. And obviously I didn't know that I had cancer in that moment, but I mean, at that point I knew it was cancer. Like what else could it be when you're talking about multiple tumors and then your lymph nodes are impacted, like fibroid, benign tumors and stuff don't grow or do that.
yeah, yeah,
My
yeah.
knowledge, to my knowledge anyways.
Well, let's
So
hang on one second. So, first of all, let's talk about your mammogram. What's that like?
they're the most uncomfortable things. And I had had mammograms before, obviously, because I had already gone down this road. And one, they smash your boobs. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. And they're just not fun. And honestly, they're not the best
Do you feel like a human?
scanning.
Do you feel like a human being in there?
No, not really. It is so you're like pressed up, your chin's over this way, and they're doing all this stuff and
Yeah.
smashing your boob and compressed down. And and honestly, it was incredibly painful because I had well, I didn't know how many tumors were in there, obviously, when I was getting this mammogram.
Oh.
But as they're smashing, it really hurt because the tumors were in there. And they're just like, we're so sorry you have to do this, and you're just like, okay, great. So for
What's
those 30 seconds where you have to hold still and it really hurts because
yeah.
there's tumors, there are blood vessels, all that kind of stuff in there. And yeah, it is not the most pleasant experience.
Yeah. What are you thinking about at this time? Because you know that you're feeling stuff, you know you're in there for like a diagnostic reason, not just for
Um,
checkup.
I mean, I already knew like in my heart that it was cancer before I got the diagnosis. Like my gut, like I just knew it. And then especially after going in and getting that mammogram and ultrasound that showed how many there was also a part of me like, and, and I think everyone goes through this, like why didn't I catch this sooner? How could all of those have been hiding in there? And for me, since I already had that fibroid adenoma, I just assumed like that was growing because my doctors told me that there was a potential for that, or that there was a potential that you could develop more fibroid adenomas down the road. So I was on that, like kind of like that mindset. And then after getting that mammogram and ultrasound in January of this year, and the radiologist reading, telling me over the phone, yeah, so there's 4 and da 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 da. You're like, fuck.
Mhm.
And I just knew it had to have been cancer. Like what else could it have been?
Well, and at
Um,
this point, you're like a crazy healthy person overall.
yes, no chronic diseases, no serious health issues. Like I watch what I put in and on my body. And that's also the crazy part. Like several years ago, stopped wearing perfumes. I only use organic makeup, only like tallow lotion with like 3 ingredients. You know, and obviously though the cancer related stuff, starts years before that. But at the same time, you're like, I was already making all of these changes, living a healthy life, and then here comes this cancer diagnosis at 39 years old, and it blew me away because it made no fucking sense.
Yeah.
No sense.
So when they tell you the words, what do they
Yep.
say? What's the what's the verbiage? Was it over the phone
So
or was it in person?
it was in person. My OBGYN, who's amazing. I love my Dr. Adamson. He has his practice out in Chandler and he's been my OBGYN for years. And so he already knew like all of this history. Like he was the one that also, found my fibroid adenoma 8 years ago. Like I've been going to him for like 10 years. And his office calls and they had me come in and it was a Friday. It was February 23rd. And so I go in and I know like I'm getting my diagnosis and he's telling me like I have cancer. Like I already knew like that's what it was. So and that was just in my heart and my gut. And you're sitting in, the little room that they put you in and you're sitting on that bench, whatever, bed table. And I'm just like nervous and anxious, fucking sweating so much because you're just that anticipation and build up, even though you know what is going to be said, but like those words haven't been said yet. So that anticipation. And he comes in and, I could just see it on his face that it was cancer. And so, he tells me, you have, um, so obviously I'd already had the biopsy at that point as well, too, because that also
Hmm.
happened in late January, early
Oh, okay, so
February.
I skipped a step
Yeah,
there.
it's okay. So yeah, so obviously I had the biopsy done after the mammogram and ultrasound and
And what did
to
they biopsy?
so they biopsied the one big tumor in my left breast, and then they also biopsied the small tumor that was on my lymph nodes in my armpit. And both came back and tested positive for cancer.
Yeah.
So at my initial diagnosis was stage 2 lobular carcinoma for breast cancer and estrogen positive, HER2 negative. So my cancer is obviously impacted by estrogen. And so he tells me all this stuff, reads all of the diagnostic jargon, blah, 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 blah. And I you're just sitting there and like shock, but I also knew what it was, but to actually hear the words, it's it's a day that like every day it's almost like it happened yesterday. And I know you can relate because you've been in, you're a two-time cancer survivor. So I know you can relate to that feeling of when you hear those words. And I mean, there's a million things rushing through your head. And the biggest thing for me was like, how do I, this healthy person at 39, have cancer? Like it just didn't make any sense. So I told my doc, I was like, draw some blood, let's do some genetic testing because like how do I have this at such a young age, especially being someone who is healthy, no chronic disease, like nothing else going on. So I did genetic testing based off of family history. And then come to find out, I actually do have a gene mutation. It's check 2 is the mutation. And it's not like a high level, like the BRCA gene. So you have the BRCA1 and the BRCA2,
Okay.
but it's the next step down. So it's a moderate high risk. And the gene mutation is associated with obviously breast cancer, but also kidney, thyroid, colon, and prostate. And who knows, possibly others as well, too, because there's still a ton that they don't even know about all of our genes
It's like
and all the ones that are related to cancer.
when I asked my endocrinologist if my thyroid cancer could be linked to having leukemia or like having chemo or anything like that
Yeah.
because it was like 15 years apart and she's all no. And I was like, yeah, right.
Like, how do you know?
It's like you've never done a study on that specifically. Don't act like you have that answer. But I mean,
Right.
it's like, it is wild. Like, because I mean, you're just saying, well, and then it's tied to this and this and this, and it's like, well, do we even know where it comes from?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, sure, it's tied to my shoulder. I bet.
Yeah, exactly. But at least like getting that information started obviously making things make more sense because you're like, okay, so right, so I'm one of the 10% of people that it's a hereditary cancer. Um, unlike the other 90% where it's related to everything else. And obviously everything has to like line up in your body for cancer to develop. So just because you have a gene mutation doesn't mean you're 100% going to get cancer. It's obviously puts you at a really high risk.
Yeah.
Um, other stuff obviously had to be going on in my body for cancer to develop and show up. Um, but at least like that helped processing it and accepting that I have cancer, like at least having that piece of information of having the genetic mutation. Otherwise, I think it would have been a lot harder. Like why the fuck me? I'm 39
Yeah.
and healthy.
Hmm.
I if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I mean, I know that when Griff's brother was diagnosed with liver cancer, because we didn't get those kind of answers.
Mm.
I mean, then it really is this big, huge question mark.
Yes.
Especially at such a young age. But really, let's face it, it seems like it's getting younger and younger and younger. Like I was
Yep.
telling you the other day, I said, why at the age of 45 am I sitting here? I know five people
Yep.
personally, that's just personally, and I've heard of countless others, that other people know and just whatever, but I know five women personally that have had both breasts removed in the
Mm.
past 2 years for either
Yeah.
BRCA or breast cancer.
Yeah.
And like when I was a kid and my parents were in their 40s, like
Right.
we had one lady in our whole like circle, I would say, that got breast cancer. Um, and it was like wild. It was a wild time.
The numbers are insane for across the board for all cancers. And the thing that also frightens me is seeing younger kids getting diagnosed for like colon cancer and things like that, which colon cancer takes like what, like almost like 8 years to grow. I mean, it's a slow growing cancer, if I'm not mistaken. So just as an example, so to me, it's just very alarming of like what's going on in our environment and our society and
Yeah.
food industry, all of that to where people are getting so sick that they're developing cancer. And I think there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, we could obviously dive way crazy into
What?
that. And
No, there's not, Tiff. There's not anything going on.
no, we're not being poisoned by our
No.
food or pesticides being sprayed over everything.
That's why
No.
like
No.
I love to follow those like 80s pages where they just do like compilation videos of like music from the 80s or toys from the
Yeah.
80s, and then every once in a
Yes.
while they'll go through like food in the 80s. And I always will like look at that and my first thought is, well, that's why I got cancer. There it is. There it is. Or the invention of Red Bull because
Oh,
I was 21 when Red Bull came out.
oh
And
yes.
spent my early bar career and drinking career just downing Red Bull like
Yeah.
none other. So when I got thyroid cancer, I was like, and now whenever I smell a Red Bull, I'm like, there's my cancer right there.
Yes. 100%. 'Cause you know how bad and how much that affects your adrenals.
Oh, dude, if
'Cause
someone opens a Red Bull within like a mile of me, I can smell it. And I'm like,
yeah,
it's so distinct.
it really is. Oh,
So,
yeah.
so distinct. Well, so also, Tiff, I mean, at this point in time, and this is one thing that I really want to draw attention to as far as your journey goes is that so you're getting this news, processing all this in. One thing I
Mhm.
remember is that originally they told you that everything was kind of slow growing, right?
Um, maybe now I'm
Because
trying to recall.
wasn't there something where, because I remember when you had your surgery and they came out and they were like, it was way bigger than we thought.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Because you were kind of in this time frame of like, I can kind of take my time right here and
Yeah.
decide what I want to do, and then come surgery time, find out that it actually had grown quite a bit.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. So my medical oncologist here in Arizona, had suggested doing chemo before surgery. And that didn't sit well with me. Like my gut was like, nope, nope, don't do it. And so I didn't. And I made the choice to do something else. I ended up doing Kambo instead, and which is peptide therapy. And I'll talk about that as well too. But going back to the surgery, yeah, they're cool. So I guess it goes back to the imaging originally. So on the imaging, on the mammogram, the one tumor that was attached to my breast tissue wall where my nipple had retracted in, it was looking like it was 6 centimeters or so on the imaging. And then, yes, when I had bilateral mastectomies with lymph node dissection on May 15th of this year, when they took all the tumors out and they did all the diagnostic stuff that they do on it, that one tumor that on imaging was 6 centimeters, actually when they pulled it out it ended up being 13 centimeters. Yeah, so it was actually twice the size but very well hidden in my breasts, obviously. But that also bumped me up from being stage 2 to stage 3.
Oh,
So
fuck.
it
Okay.
actually was worse than what, I mean, my doctors didn't know. So they were all really shocked. They're like, yeah, so you were a little bit worse than what we thought. And, so that was kind of shocking, but at the same time, like, I don't know that it didn't rock me as much because you're like, well, you removed all of it. So because it's gone now, like the tumors are
Yeah.
gone, obviously.
It's like a weird space to be in because you're like, it's this really high impact news, but then there's like this gratitude piece for it because you're like, well, I'm saving my life at the
Yeah.
same time, but like it's this really weird space to be in, I think,
Yes.
where you're
It,
trying
it
to find the beauty in the pain kind of scenario.
yes.
And there always is in these situations, but it's like it's so weird to be talking about, especially at this juncture, because you've been through so much. And now you're like,
Hmm.
no, well, actually, especially now after going through chemo and stuff, you're like, well, that was actually pretty easy in comparison. Or this was, I don't know if that is for you, but it's, I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say. Are you getting what I'm saying a little
I
bit?
get, yeah. Yeah.
Where
I get what you're
it's
saying.
like the perspective starts to shift about what
Yes.
we're grateful for and what we're not,
Yes.
like in those moments. And
Yeah.
to find like oh, and that was a good thing in the midst of all this like horrific crap.
Yeah. Yeah. And circling, like going off of like what you're just saying, the one decision I made, so I'm going to go back to when I was sitting in my doctor's office and I got the diagnosis,
Hmm.
you have stage 2 breast cancer. And you have two choices in that moment. I believe you do. And it's either you're going to go down the road of pity party, woe is me, victim mentality, negative Nancy, I mean, whatever you want to call it, or you're going to be the fighter and you're going to do whatever's best and like take charge ahead, like straight on. And that was the decision that I made right there in that moment in my doctor's office because I knew anything other than that was not going to get me through the journey that lied ahead of me. Because if I wanted to live in the woe is me, treatment's not going to work, cancer could spread. I mean, like all those other things, because now you're in that mindset of, well, this happened to me and oh, it's not going to get better. And oh my gosh, this cancer, blah, 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 blah. Well, of
Hmm.
course, then all of those things are going to happen for you if that is the mindset that you believe in. And I just knew from that day, February 23rd, every decision I've made since then has all been what's going to be best for me and how can I tackle this and do it head on, but also do it on my timeline when I'm ready. And that was, I think, another big piece of part of making all of these medical decisions that you have, because your doctors want you to go, 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 and do
Yeah.
everything right then and there because it's critical, 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 or whatever. And you're like, you don't even get a moment to just breathe and process, to also feel it in your body, to then also come up with a decision.
Right.
And I I made time to have all the right information, give myself time to process everything and come up with the right answer and right decision. Like I wasn't going to go just blindly follow what my doctors said,
Right.
you know. I
Right.
That's just not who I am as a person anyways, and I've worked even prior to this, like I've worked in the field of nonprofits and working in the disability community and working with, survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and all this kind of stuff. And I've told all these people, like, you have to be an advocate for yourself. Like, you live in your body, all these kinds of things. Well, I have to take my own advice, and how I've helped
Mhm.
other people is
Mhm.
I have to listen to my body. I have to be my own best advocate, and I have to do what's right for me, not just because my doctor said so or this. Like, if you're going to tell me I got to do some kind of treatment or a protocol or whatever, you best be giving me some data and information to back it up. And it can't just be, well, because
This is what
this
we
is the
do.
protocol and this is the guidelines. Well, that's wonderful and that's great, but I'm a unique individual. I'm not like Sally over here, even though we might have the same breast cancer,
What?
you know.
You guys aren't identical twins with identical lives and
Yeah.
houses and partners and jobs.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, everything you said is just so spot on, and I'll just go ahead and I mean, like, you can see that anytime you have a human being in a vulnerable situation, especially after they receive life impacting news,
Yeah.
where that's like got this really big fear circle right around it because it's so unknown. And we're really susceptible as individuals at that
Mhm.
point in time. Like that's a major kind of fight or flight moment, and we're
Yeah.
really susceptible to outside opinions
Yes.
during that time. And yes, there are times that things have to be moved on. But it is interesting. Like when I got my thyroid taken out, they took the left side first because that's where the tumor was. And they told me, once we get in there and we get the left side out, we're gonna like really slice that sucker up and biopsy it and test it and whatever. And if it comes back that it's, got like a lot of cancer or whatever, then we're gonna go back in and take out the right side. Because chances are, right? And I'm
Hmm.
31. I'm not doing any of the stuff I'm doing now. So and it's my second time, so I'm in panic. I'm in pure panic mode.
Oh, yeah.
Like, don't give me chemotherapy. That's all I'm thinking is like, okay,
Yep.
cool. Like I've got a kind of cancer where all I got to do is surgery. Like
Yep.
easy. And so they took out the left side and it was like this horrible day. I was supposed to have surgery at like 5 a.m. and I kept getting pushed back because of like emergency surgeries that this
Yeah.
guy had to do. And so I actually didn't get my thyroid out till like 9 o'clock at night. Like it
Oh
was,
my
I
gosh.
mean, I don't even know. It was late though. It was really late. And so just gone through this like horrible, horrific situation. Next day, doctor walks in my room and says, there was way more cancer than we thought. Like the whole thing was just like loaded. So you're coming back on Monday to get the right side out. And I mean, I remember that I started bawling because I
Yep.
mean, I just had, right, you've just gone through this whole situation and now you just got hit with this other bit of, I just started bawling. This is a true story, by the way. The surgeon looks at me and he's like, there's nothing to cry about. It's just an easy surgery. We'll just take out the other half. I'll see you on Monday. And walked out. And I was just sitting there, and of course, the the whole premise of like, okay, well, again, I'm instantly like, well, at least it's just surgery, right? Just like easy. I just get this thing taken
Yeah.
out and that's all that matters. But of course, I'm just in agreement. Like
Yep.
everything that he said, because it was right. I'm already
Mm-hmm.
like deep in vulnerability, fight or flight. I've just had one side of my thyroid taken out. My kids are little and tiny. And there's all of those fears. I've already had
Yep.
cancer once. All of this is playing into what's going on in my body. And then he walks in and says that and says, see you on Monday. And I'm like, see you on Monday.
Yep.
See you on Monday. And I went in and got the other half taken out. And like there was no pause. There wasn't that pause in there um to assess and do some research and like whatever
Yeah.
because of of the mode that I was in. And there was just
Yeah.
I was so panicked that I was just going to agree with whatever they said
Yeah.
because right, they know best. I
Yeah. Yeah.
so
They know best because they're the doctors with the white coats. And,
absolutely.
and I don't have anything against like Western medicine. Like Western medicine has its place, but at the same time, like I feel like sometimes these doctors either forget that we're human beings or that they're human beings as well too. And you're like, you live in that world. Everyone you see is a cancer patient. But like this is brand new for a lot of people, and they're the cavalier of like, oh, it's not a big deal. Oh, it's just a surgery.
Yeah.
It's a surgery that's removing an organ and you're never getting it back. Like your thyroid's gone.
Right, right.
And the rest of your life looks so different. You have to be on meds the rest of your life because you don't have the thyroid doing the function that it's supposed to be doing, or whatever it is. If you're not for anyone else, any other organs or whatever, that kind of stuff that's now gone.
Right. Well, and I mean, truthfully, probably a lot of that, some of that, and in that moment is about his schedule,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
especially for surgeons. So it's like, hey, let's get you on a
I,
Monday. Let's get you on a Monday. And also part of it was like they don't want you to heal like your body to have too many days to heal up right here before they recut the same
oh, that's
place.
interesting.
So that's part of it too. But again, that's, like it's not based off of um the thyroid part of it or the cancer part of it. That's just
Yes.
um trying to make it easier, I guess, on my body and the surgeon.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I encountered the same thing when I needed to get my port placed and put in before I got chemo. They're like, well, the surgeon's only available here and here. I was like, I'm like, I'm not doing this tomorrow. No, 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 no. Like, I'm not ready. Well, then she's not going to be available for like another month. And I'm like, then I'm doing it in a month.
Yeah.
Like, and it, the way they make you feel I remember talking to the surgeons, whoever receptionist person, the scheduler, and it sounded like she was annoyed, and you're just like, no, no, you work for me. I am the patient. I'm driving all of this. Like, yes, you're a medical expert, but no, I'll do it when I'm ready.
Yeah.
And but it's so crazy because I've heard it so many times from so many other people. They're like, wait, you can push back your surgery? You don't have to do that? Oh, you can fire your doctor? I was
Right.
like, yes, you can fire your doctor. Like all these people who don't know, and you're just like,
And they
wow.
really don't. They
And
really
they
don't.
really don't. And I went in with this like eyes wide open, but I've also been in the space of like personal growth and like healing and working on unresolved childhood trauma and just wanting to be a better human being and like work on my past so that I can be more, I can do more. And also I'm at 100%. So I can be 100% for myself, but also for everyone else in my life. And I've always been on the preventative side anyways.
Yeah.
So going into this, it was, and kind of going back to what you've already touched on too, you have all these other people giving you their opinions as well
Mhm.
too, especially like family members. and friends who like, I wish you would do this. I want you to do this. And you're like, it's all great and wonderful, but I'm also going to make the decisions on what feels right for me. And sometimes that doesn't sit well with people. I know Adam and I had some hard conversations around, chemo, radiation, and all that kind of stuff. Because prior to getting this diagnosis, I would have told you, oh, got cancer, fuck radiation, fuck chemo. I wouldn't do any of those things. Da 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
You just think you would do this and do that, and you honestly have no idea until you're
Until
delivered
you.
that news and you're actually in it. Because yeah, prior I was all like, nope, chemo, the worst thing, radiation, the worst thing, all these things are horrible. And it's not always for everyone, and everyone has to find out what's right for themselves. But I also I know what those have done to other people as well too, because I've seen family members and friends who've gone through it. And you grapple with I had to get to a place where I could accept that chemo and radiation had to be on the table as options. And I sought multiple opinions as well too. Prior to doing chemo, I went and saw a naturopathic physician who specialized in cancer. I I got second opinions from another integrative cancer center based out of Chicago, which is the one I actually went to get chemotherapy, which I'll talk about as well too. I got multiple opinions, and all of them were also saying the same thing. So then you're like, fuck, maybe I do really need it. If I've also looked on the eastern side and the western side, and I had to get to a place where I had to accept that had to be treatment that I was going to have to say yes to. And man, it took a bit. And that was also another reason why I was also doing stuff on my timeline, because if I wasn't 100% in or didn't believe 100% that it was going to work, then it wasn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that was another piece of it too, is like I had to get to a place where I accepted, all right, I'm going to be doing chemo and it is going to work. And I had to get there before I jumped in to treatment and doing chemo, or otherwise I knew it wasn't going to work. I had to shift my mindset and accept that this was now the avenue.
Dang,
Yeah,
dang, dang. Well, and I mean, I remember, you know, because it was like this, like hovering point because you have been so holistic as far as
yeah,
your health is concerned. And so I remember that there was this like super teeter-totter
yeah.
phase. And then that's when you did the combo. So let's talk about that.
Ooh, yeah.
That was
So,
intense.
oh my gosh, it was intense, but fuck, one of the most powerful, life-changing experiences I've had. So, so circling back, so prior to having my bilateral mastectomies and lymph node dissection on May 15th, and again, like my medical oncologist here wanted me to do chemo before surgery, and I was like, no, I don't want to put my body in that place. Like I want my body to be primed for surgery, so it's in a healthy, good place. So I made the decision to go alternative and do Kambo, which is peptide therapy. And for anyone who doesn't know, so the medicine actually comes from it's a secretion that these frogs from the Amazon make. It's not psychoactive, it's not illegal or anything. But within this secretion are it's like 18 or 20 different naturally occurring peptides. And they use this medicine um, and ceremony. So you could go to a clinic and get peptide therapy. It's also super expensive and costs like thousands of dollars, but it's all synthetic made. This
Yeah.
is real natural occurring peptides from an animal, living in the wild.
Hmm.
And so it's all done in ceremony. So there's a protocol for cancer to where in 30 days you do 12 ceremonies, but you do a 3 by 3. Um, so I did 3 single sessions the beginning of April, And then the last weekend of April, I had my 3x3 series. So it was what, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I did 3 Kambo sessions a day, 3 days in a row. So it was a morning ceremony, an afternoon ceremony, and then like an early evening ceremony. And for those who aren't familiar with Kambo, so how the ceremony goes is, and each one is like totally different because your intention for each ceremony is going to be different as well too. And of course, as I was going into to doing Kambo, a lot of it was like, yes, I want to work on some unresolved childhood trauma, but like, a lot of it was going to be about, my cancer and all this kind of stuff. And then as I started going into the ceremonies, a lot of that changed. But before I get into that, like I'll talk about like the ceremony first. So the plant medicine, or sorry, it's animal medicine. So the Kambo comes from, like I mentioned, the frog in the secretion, and it's dry. It ends up looking dried before it gets applied. And so you sit with your intention. The really cool part as well too is it's all energy based as well. So each time you do ceremony, one is different, but also where the medicine is placed is different because your intentions change, which I found very fascinating as well too. And what happens is you take like a little incense stick that's been lit and you get marked on your skin, whether it's your arms, ankles, legs, back. A lot of mine was on my back, some of my arms, and a little bit on my ankles, but a lot on my back. And then the medicine is applied directly to essentially like that open, small little wound where your skin has been broken by the little incense stick. And that whole, once you've kind of like sat through that piece, so then the next piece, so once the medicine's put on, it's only about like 20 minutes that you go through the cycle of the meds, which obviously your body ends up getting flushed and you purge. Most people throw up. There are some people that are bottom purgers. So that does happen as well too. And I was only like a throw up, but your bile and stuff like looks different, and it was just crazy, the stuff that like came out and how much comes out, especially when you're doing 3 ceremonies a day in like 3 days. I was like, how could there be all of this coming out? It was fucking hard because that is a lot to process and do in a very short period of time. And what I thought or expected going into the 3x3 was not really what came out, but in a better way as well too. It was God, just reflecting back, I just keep thinking about like how powerful the ceremonies were, and each one being so different, and the lessons that I got out of it as well. You know, I did feel like I worked on a lot of childhood trauma through the ceremonies, but also this generational trauma piece as well too. Um, and this is one of the ceremonies that stuck out. I can't remember if it was on Saturday. I think it was on Saturday, and it was the last ceremony of the day. So this was not my sixth one. And so did the intention, the facilitator, put the medicine on. I go through the purging. And then after the purging is done, you lay down, close your eyes, and you rest and obviously relax, let the medicine finish doing what it's going to do. And each time I had different visions, like when I laid down and like I closed my eyes. And this one, I think was one of the more powerful ones because so go through it. I lay down on my side, just letting everything just be in kind of process. And the visions that came up were of all these female women that are family members, some still alive, like I saw my mom and my sister. But then it was like my grandma showed up, like my great grandma, my great aunt, and all these other like women in my family that I never met, because some of them I'd never met before, only like pictures, or I didn't even like know who they were because they could have been like so far, great, great, greats grandmas, great aunts, whatever. And they all just kept coming to me in this vision as I'm like laying there and like processing everything. And I kept hearing from all of them that everything is going to be okay and you are loved. And it just kept on repeat and then flashing back and forth between all these different, women in my family. And it was one of the most moving experiences. And obviously, at the same time, I'm getting choked up talking about it, but I did really feel that everything was going to be okay and that I am loved as well too. And coming from a lot of childhood trauma of I didn't feel like I was valued or enough or that I was lovable, because those were messages that I received when I was younger, to have that happen at such like a pivotal time was like everything, you know? And I really do feel like doing those Kambo ceremonies as a part of this journey, preparing myself to go into surgery and then the next phases. I knew I had to work on that stuff because I knew a lot of it was also connected to my cancer as well too. Um, Especially with all of it being contained on the left side, where your left side is that mothering, nurturing, you know,
Yep.
it 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 started making a lot of sense and where you're connecting the dots. And I've spent a lot of time working on myself, but having this cancer diagnosis really fucking pushed me through to like really dig deep and really bring a lot of stuff to the surface and process that maybe I didn't know was there or was there and I was either ignoring it or not like recognizing it. And so going through this has one, it's opened my eyes and like, yes, it's fucking shitty. Like no one should ever get cancer, but at the same time, like there is beautiful stuff that can come out of this. And there's also been a lot of beautiful growth and healing that's happened. I'm, I'm not just physically, because my body's doing a lot of that, but from this spiritual realm as well too. Uh, and yeah, that's just been some of the biggest stuff. And so continuing and then doing Kambo, I mean, I'm so grateful that I made that decision to do it. And even though, God, fuck, it was hard as fuck. It was worth every single moment because you were purging out what needed to be purged to open up space for what needed to be brought into my life as well too, which is, more love, more gratitude, more compassion, more grace, all that kind of stuff. And I was releasing and creating space for more abundance and more of that. And also letting go. And that was also another big piece as well too, is I didn't realize how much stuff I was holding on to and stuff that had happened in the past. And the Kambo ceremonies really helped me let a lot of that go. And so after the 3 days, not just because like I purged a bunch of stuff, so you're like, oh, you feel lighter in that sense physically, but also lighter in a spiritual sense as well too, because I worked through a lot of stuff in that short period of time, but also let a lot of things go. And it was a huge shift for me that I looking back, like I obviously needed, and I think it really helped prepare me for what was coming next, which after the Kambo it was surgery on the 15th. Um, and surgery didn't go how it was planned to go either, and I can talk about that as well too if you want to go into the
Yeah,
surgery.
I think that I mean, I would say that that is first of all, let me say this. The Campbell experience, like, and how you talk about it is so beautiful. And what I was hearing in that moment is when you talk about it, you're like, okay, so I felt unloved as a kid, So this was a really pivotal experience for me because here I am in this circle of my female family
Mhm.
and receiving that, like and getting this message. But the impactful part of the spiritual work, and especially when we're doing the spiritual work when we're on the ground, and I don't mean like physically on the ground, I mean metaphorically on the ground.
Mhm.
Because right as we strip more layers away and we're really, really raw, that's where some of the most beautiful stuff
Oh yeah.
happens. And but to be so lost and then to have that overwhelming feeling of
Yeah.
support. And you're in a space where you're like, well, these people, I cannot physically see them, or it's not like I'm surrounded physically by these people, but you are. Like you
Yes.
can totally feel it. It is palpable. It is
Yep.
almost like you could reach out and someone would physically be there. And you're
Yes.
so surrounded by it that it is this like full body um sensation, whereas, right, just like positive thinking
Hmm.
isn't necessarily going to get you there to
No.
that just full where it comes from the body first.
Yes. Yes.
Like where I'm not conjuring it and saying, okay, like, well, picture what this feels like, Megan. And, because I do that too sometimes, or I have to be like,
Yeah.
what does love feel like? And really like try to get it to come from my body.
Yeah.
It's more this is like emanating, like this is like such a resonant feeling, like it's so intense that I can't, like, I have no choice but to know that this is love. Do you know what
Yes.
I mean? You know what I mean?
Yes.
To
100%.
know that I'm surrounded by it, and it's a knowing. It's not like, is this what's happening right now? Like like when we have thoughts and we're like back and forth and
Yeah.
teeter-tottering and all of that. It's so palpable that there is no other way to think about it.
Yes.
There is no other way to think about it. Okay, my little ice bath friend is here. So let's take our
Okay.
break. This will be like 20 minutes. All right. Okay, Tiff. So
Right.
we were
We're
just
back.
talking about, we're back. We're back. We were just talking about your combo experience, and
Hmm.
uh, and then we remembered that you have this friend
Hmm.
that had chatted with you. You want to talk about that?
I do because there is a connection to the my Kambo experience, especially that vision that I had just shared about of, having all of these family women, you know, come to me as I finished that sixth Kambo session. So I have this wonderful friend, Agnieszka. She's a beautiful human being. We've known each other for over 10 years now, and she lives in Australia, but she's an energy worker, massage therapist, all this kind of stuff. Super cool and rad. And so we text a lot or like send each other like funny memes over Instagram, like how that's how you keep your friendships alive, right? Especially long distance. So she knew what I was going through, and there weren't very many people I told until I got my official diagnosis. So she was one of like the very few. I only like let a couple of close friends kind of in on the loop. Obviously, you were one of them as well too, because you're one of my besties. So my friend Agnieszka is amazing, wonderful, fantastic. Love her so much. But one of probably the most life altering things that she said to me as I already got this like cancer diagnosis, but what she had shared with me that what had messages that were sent to her. So she she's how do I say this? She's open to people's spiritual guides, spirit guides. So whether you want to call them spirit guides, guardian angels, whatever your belief system is, like she is open and can communicate. So if you want to call her a medium, whatever. Anyways, so she knew that I had breast cancer before I got my diagnosis. So the day I was like getting my diagnosis, going to my doctor, like I said, that Friday, February 23rd, um, my spirit guides went and talked to her. I don't know why or whatever, but they did. And so she knew that I had breast cancer and it was all in my left breast before I told her like that day. So, which is super wild and crazy. So after I got my diagnosis, like I reached out to her because obviously she was like one of the first people that I told. And she's like, do you have time? Can you hop on a call? I have something to share with you. And I was like, what could you possibly share with me? Like, I just found out about cancer. Like what? I didn't know like if something crazy was happening in her life or whatever. She got some news. Like, I had no idea what it was. So she called me like through Facebook Messenger, and she told me she's like, so I already knew that you had breast cancer, and it was all like in your left breast and went to your lymph nodes before you told me. And I was like, well, how could you possibly know that? And she's like, your spirit guides came to talk to me. And I had known like she had done this kind of work and could do that, but I didn't know on what kind
Like
of
to what extent?
level,
Yeah.
to what extent. And so I was like, so she asked me, she's like, do you want me to communicate with you like what they told me? And I was like, well, yeah, like of course I want to know what they told you. Like, yes. And she doesn't talk to anyone's spirit guides without their permission or anything like that. Like that's obviously you don't do that. That's obviously crossing lines. And but they reached out to her. So she listened, and oh my gosh, it gives me goosebumps like every time I share this part of the story. So, and I don't remember like verbatim because it was so much that came in, and I just had one of those like jaw-dropping moments, and like I got goosebumps everywhere. So so she told me that so your spirit guides came to talk to me. They told me, you have cancer, you have breast cancer and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, wow, well, that's like wild, like why did they come and like reach out to you? And so she tells me, and again, like I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember verbatim because it was like a huge shock. But so she told me that so my spirit guides told them that I have to go through this. I have to go through breast cancer and go through this journey because I'm the first female and or family member in my family lineage that has the power and the strength and ability to break my family's like generational trauma.
Mhm.
And for me to do that, a big piece of it is going through and having cancer and going through this. And I mean, I've shared this story like multiple times, and oh my God, it gives me goosebumps every time. But I'm going to put myself back in that moment of I was like standing in my bathroom, bedroom, or whatever, and obviously like fucking devastated because I was, I found out that I had cancer, and I'd already told this part of my story that at my doctor's office, I made the decision that I'm going down the route of I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going head on, positive, what all this kind of stuff. And then I get this, and one, like, what the fuck do you do with that information? Like, I'm the first person in like my family that is going to break like generational trauma. I mean, like, and who also gets that information through a spirit guide in that kind of sense? Well, and obviously as a facilitator going through my friend, like I was just blown away, humbled. And at the same time, you're like, that's also a lot of fucking pressure to, be that person. But at the same time, right? Like, oh, okay. So I
You're
got to
all,
break
wait a
generation.
second, wait a second.
You're like, but at the same time, it was the most empowering thing as well too, because you're like, so clearly I have this power and ability within me and this strength. Otherwise, like, why else would my spirit guides have gone to talk to her? Why would they have told her this? for obviously for her to also tell me, but like there's clearly something here, and I have this profound opportunity, but also a sense of an obligation as well too, to like help my family have and for generations to come not have to be burdened with horrible generational trauma that came down on both sides of my family. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to like unpack there. I mean, family members who are sexual assault survivors, mostly females, childhood abuse and trauma, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And for it to be like, you're the person, I mean, I just was like, I don't even know what to do with this
Yeah.
information. But at the same
Overwhelmed and
time,
honored.
overwhelmed and honored is exactly. But I think about that conversation that her and I had like almost every day. And it is a driving force into a lot of my decisions, but also on fuck, like I have this huge opportunity and also like what a blessing as well too. Like that it's me and I have this ability and power to be able to do this. One for myself, like a lot of it is obviously for me, but also for my family as well too, and then the generations to come.
Do you also think, Tiff, that because as you're talking, I'm like, well, it's not just when we talk about generational trauma, we tend to just think about our family line, and then maybe we can be like, well, and even though I'm a female, and of course, we go to our mom's side first, we think about aunts and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff over there, and then you're like, well, wait, my dad had a mom, and then we kind of like go over there a little bit, but what about females as a whole? Like the
Yes.
female, femininity and the female form since the dawn of
Hmm.
time. We're
Yeah.
talking about like massive amounts of generational trauma just being part of the female tribe.
Yes.
And
Yes.
especially the attack on, I'm just going to go ahead and go here, but like kind of like attack on femininity that we've even done ourselves.
Yep.
um, and what we've the pressures we place on our own bodies, the pressures we place on each other's
Hmm.
bodies. Um, that breast cancer, I mean, let's be real. Things, even though men can get breast cancer, stuff it very much is like this.
Yeah.
This is a feminine disease,
Yes. Hmm.
and it's. I think that what you're also doing, or what I see you doing, and the type of female that you are in this situation, and um, what you have put out there as far as your experience, which has been incredibly transparent, I think,
Hmm.
and real, uh, is that it's also this voice for not just and healing,
Yeah.
not just for the females in your family, but for like femininity as a whole, if you're paying
Mm.
attention.
Yeah. I haven't really thought about it like that, but I guess I probably have in the sense of what I've also been communicating and sharing. And I do want to help other people. And I've been in the helping profession like my whole life, pretty much. I've spent my entire career working in nonprofits, helping others. So yeah, like I could have gone down this journey in secret, but at the same time, I was very compelled to share my journey and my story because like what if I can help someone else, And I've been very transparent and I totally love it as well too. And I welcome all of the questions that anyone has and all that kind of stuff, you know, because I get to educate people as well. And you don't know who else is suffering or hurting or who else is going through what you're going through or something similar or not similar, whatever. I mean,
Hmm. Well, and I think there's an important aspect of, you may not have had breast cancer or are a breast cancer survivor or are a female,
mhm.
but there's no way in hell that you don't know somebody
Oh
anymore.
yeah.
Everyone
No.
knows somebody that
Yep.
is being affected by this, for sure. And so I also think that an important part and why I want to do this is because um, if you know a female, then you should be listening,
Yes.
right? So that
Yeah.
you can know how know get a little bit of a glimpse, get a little bit of a glimpse into what support looks like for somebody going through cancer, or the support that you can offer yourself, um,
Yeah.
things like that. And I just like that's what I admire about you. And just even as you were talking about um, the stuff through Kambo and kind of this feminine outpouring from your
Hmm.
family, just for anybody, right, dealing with breast cancer or um, working on their feminine side of life.
Yeah.
That's really impactful stuff. So that's what I mean by like
Yes.
we're talking about, yeah, there's the generational trauma within your
Yeah.
family line specifically,
Yeah.
and then there are females as a whole.
Yeah. And, you know, going off of that as well, it it's uh it's been really hard and because I've spent a lot of time working on loving myself and loving my body because I spent a lot of childhood and even like late adolescence into adulthood, your 20s and 30s, really being like insecure. And most people are surprised when they hear that because they're like, oh, you come across. I was like, I come across that way, but I fucking struggle just like everyone else. And I'm super
You're all the
insecure.
wall's been curated, okay?
Yes,
It just has like a shiny personality on the outside.
exactly. But I've done a lot of work, and I worked really hard to get to a place where I love my body, I appreciate my body, and when you get a diagnosis like this, where, I mean, I lost, my boobs. I mean, those are body parts
Yeah,
that are gone forever. And I fucking loved my boobs as well, too. And it
they
was,
were great. They were great.
I thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But when you've worked so hard to finally get to a place where like you love yourself, you love your body, all that, to then be like, oh, well, here's cancer. And oh, by the way, we're taking your boobs.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
like,
you're losing this huge piece of yours, and I don't think people realize, or we'll say males, um, and not for any fault of their own, other than that they
yeah,
just don't have them. I mean,
yeah,
you go through such a fucking process with your boobs from day one, like the first day, and I wouldn't even say that you notice your boobs. It's the first day you kind of notice that you
yes,
might get some one day
yes,
to, we'll say like, my first day in sixth grade gym class when I showed up and every girl had a sports bra on but me. And I was like,
yeah,
wait a fucking second. Like, so now I'm adorning this piece of my body when I had no boobs yet, but for sure I went home that night and was like, I need a bra.
right?
And you go through all those processes. Did they get big? Are they tiny? Did you get made fun of? Did you all these
Yeah,
things? When was the first time they got grabbed? When was the first like all
yeah,
of these and sexual experiences and whatever else,
yes,
and your clothing that you wore, the things you did to accentuate them, the things that you did, were you part of the Victoria's Secret era where you,
100%, yes,
bolstered them up times 200 and put in the like little cutlets? I did both. Um, and you're right. And then it comes, and then you're in the time of life where it's kind of, for a lot of people, not everyone, but it's kind of coming in this first full circle where you're like, really just like, I just like appreciate this as a whole.
hmm,
And
yes,
I fucking love it. And I've been through all these things with my body and hated it and hated this and hated that and didn't get why this didn't work and blamed it on my boobs or didn't blame it on my boobs or whatever. Like
yeah,
it is like a fucking integrated part of your life. Your boobs are.
yes,
If you're a
yes,
female, is an like, every shirt you put on. It's like,
yep,
how do my boobs look? How do I whatever. So
yeah,
it's a huge piece. And then to be it's let's like talk about surgery because this is like perfect
yeah,
segue.
it is.
So they're like, hey, we're doing we're recommending a double mastectomy. What does that feel like?
I mean, first of all, like it's hard to even grapple the fact that like when you have to have surgery, right? So then you're like, and surgery is a big deal. to then accept the fact that you're going to lose your boobs. And also, like, I've lost my nipples as well too. Like some women are fortunate enough where, they're able to have their nipples saved, and they just reattach them on. Well, I didn't have that luxury because on my left breast, my nipple was has retracted in. So they're
Oh,
like,
because it was like attached to that
because
tumor.
yeah, that tumor on my breast tissue wall was like, it was making its way closer and closer to the surface of my skin.
Hmm.
And my surgeon was like, I'm not going to be able to save, your nipple. And you're like, so you're losing your boobs, can't save the nipple. You're like, okay. And so then you're like, well, I guess then tattooed nipples it is down the road. I mean, like that's the option for me anyways. And then but you have to grasp the fact that, like, yes, it's boobs. And for some people, like, well, it's just your boobs. But like you were just saying, it is such a huge part of your femininity, but it's also your boobs are there for other reasons as well, too. If you want to look at child rearing so that you're able to nourish your babies by feeding them breast milk, well, those are gone. That's not an option anymore. If you
Hmm.
decide if you get to have kids after going through this, there's all these pieces, and it's not just like, well, you're losing your boobs. Well, go lose another limb or something like that. It's on that level of
Absolutely.
and some people are just like, oh, shouldn't be a big deal, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it is a big deal.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, and so that was a hard piece to have to, and honestly, it was one of like the hardest was accepting the fact like I was going to be losing my boobs. And then when surgery didn't go as planned, that's a whole nother piece that I had to accept when I woke up from anesthesia.
Yeah.
And then
So
I'll
talk
talk about
about
that.
that. Talk about what
Yeah.
they told you was going to happen, and then
Yes.
like what you were expecting going in, and then what they
Yeah.
told you when you got out.
Yeah. So breast cancer surgeon responsibility is, making sure they get all of the cancer out. And then you have your reconstructive surgeon who's in there to do the next step. So my breast cancer surgeon, fantastic. My reconstructive surgeon, also amazing and wonderful. Like I'm lucky that I do have a great team around me. So when meeting with both, you obviously go over all the options and blah blah blah. And it, I was blown away with how many reconstructive options there are as well too, which is insane.
Really?
Yeah, there's like so many that people can do. So meeting with my reconstructive surgeon, um, again going back, like I love my boobs, so the thought of having fake boobs was never anything that crossed my mind because I love my boobs and I had great ones. But now I'm obviously entertaining the idea because, I've lost them. So like my plan was I was considering getting implants in. So I met with my reconstructive surgeon. We talked about all the ideas. And obviously I share, like my concerns because I have related to implants because I
Hmm.
have some friends who've had their implants removed because they got breast implant illness, or they're like, yeah, this isn't congruent with me anymore. But when you're in this situation, it is totally different because it's not cosmetic. Like this is all medical. Like you're going to be losing your boobs. So what do you want as reconstructive? Because you're going to need something.
Hmm.
Um, and so for me, I was like, I in that moment, I was like, I don't know that I could do flat from having like size D boobs. And I had boobs at an early age as well, too. So I had boobs in fifth grade and got my period. So like, and they were like C's then too when I was in fifth grade. So I've always had boobs. So I don't know what it's like to not, to be born with and have like develop like only like an A cup and be like small. I don't know what any of that's like. Like I was very
I was
fortunate to,
always jealous of girls like you, Steph.
yeah. So bringing it back, it, having implants was never a thought. And then now all of a sudden it's an option being presented. And I was like, well, to kind of make me look like how I did, implants were my option.
Hmm.
So when in my meeting with my reconstructive surgeon, like we talked about that. And, I've had a couple friends who have gone through breast cancer prior to me getting my diagnosis. They went the implant route as well too. So I got to talk to them to, hear about all that kind of stuff. I was like, yeah, this sounds like something I'm willing to consider. So the plan for surgery was I didn't really want expanders in my breasts. My reconstructive surgeon was like, here's an option. Let's talk about this. So you're probably going to do chemo and radiation. You're going to need that. So why don't we, when you have your surgery, I'm going to put in small placeholder implants. You'll go through your chemo and radiation. Then after radiation, you'll have another surgery and we'll put in your permanent implants. And then, you'll be done. And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. Like, I love that. Like, yes, let's. So that was the plan. And then the backup was if couldn't fit in like the smaller, like placeholder implants, was going to put in expanders.
Okay.
So, and that was the plan. I was like, you know what? That works for me. Like, I feel like yes, that's the plan. Like, let's go with it.
And I remember you being super on board.
Yes. Yeah. Super on board. I was like, yeah, this sounds right. So here comes surgery and circling kind of back to what I had mentioned before, surgery didn't go as planned and not in a bad way. But I'd already kind of talked about this where that one tumor was actually bigger than what was on the imaging. So, so I go to the hospital, gonna have surgery, which is also obviously frightening. And I know you can relate, anytime you're gonna go under the knife, especially for something like this. But I got to a place where I was like, okay, yep, I'm in this positive place, accepting where I am, and going in good spirits. So then, so surgery was a little over 4 hours. It ended up being a little bit longer than they had anticipated, but also my cancer was more advanced than what they had thought. So my breast cancer surgeon had to take more skin and tissue than she had planned. And then, so when my reconstructive surgeon went in to go do his stuff, he attempted, from what my mom told me after surgery, he tried to put in placeholder implants. He even tried to put in expanders, and like it just didn't work. So I'm very grateful that he didn't try to push something to where then I ended up with some complications after surgery. But yeah, so when I woke up in the recovery room from anesthesia, I was going in thinking it was there was either going to be some implants or
you were going
expanders
in with boobs, you were coming out with them.
Yes. And when I woke up, that was not the case. My reconstructive surgeon couldn't do it. And so just stitched up. So since May 15th, I've been totally flat and will be obviously until I get reconstructive surgery in 2025. But also like that, I didn't think, I mean, there's probably part of me that thought about like, if anything doesn't work, like you can't get it in, I would obviously be flat. But I just didn't think that that was going to be like an option. And then you wake up and you're flat. And then I have my mom and my boyfriend telling me everything that like happened that the surgeons, went out and told them during the process. You're just like, it's a lot. It's a lot, especially when you go from being a D cup to now there's nothing besides, the scar across each side and, some skin that's there that they kind of like have kept for when I will get implants down the road. But and to see that for the first time when taking a shower after surgery, I couldn't even fucking like look in the mirror. I couldn't. It was like too much. It was too overwhelming. And like for like my first 4 showers, I just like fucking cried, because the rest of the time you're in that compression
Yeah, yeah,
special
yeah.
special bra you have to have on because your drains, I had 2 drains on each side. So the rest of the time you don't see it because you have to wear this bra
And
the
it's
rest
like
of the
because
day.
it's so tight, it like almost
Yeah.
it gives that feeling
Yes. Until you
that
take it
there's something
off
there. Yeah.
and go to get into the shower. That was real fucking hard. Real fucking hard. Surgery didn't go as planned, which, again, I am grateful that my reconstructive surgeon didn't try to push anything so that I had some complications afterwards. But then you're like, fuck, this cancer was like a little bit more worse than
Hmm.
what anyone had thought or known. I mean, it wasn't just me, my doctors were like, yeah. So, but again, like you don't really know until you really get in there and have that surgery. Imaging can
Absolutely.
only do so much.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so, going back to this, now I had to get comfortable in this new body that you don't really recognize. And while you're also trying to battle cancer and heal a lot of stuff and do all these things, yeah, there's
Well, and
times where
it's
it's
not
fucking overwhelming.
I bet I bet and it's like it's a crazy onslaught of drastic information.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're just getting this one piece and you're like, okay, let me like chew on that for a couple days and then I find something. It's like literally it's like a um like more than a smack in the face. Like it's like a
Yeah.
you're you're drowned in information and um just like you said, it's like a lot of times with people with cancer and surgeries, once the surgeon gets in there, and you're out. There's no like, hey,
Mhm.
we're gonna wake you up and I'm gonna talk to you about what we found and like we'd really
No.
like to take some more breast tissue. Like you come out and you find out that they have taken more than you thought they were going to, which
Yeah.
you probably would have agreed to, but then there's also the processing of that you got bypassed about your own body. Like
Yeah.
you weren't involved in that decision. You were asleep. Now you're not only finding out that I don't have what I thought I was going to have
Hmm.
when I got out, but also I'm getting a more serious diagnosis at the same time.
Yeah. Yep.
Also, right, you have a job,
Yeah.
you
Oh, yeah.
have a boyfriend that you live with,
Yep.
you have a stepson,
Hmm.
right? Like they're that are also having like they're having their experiences,
Yeah.
right? Because we know that Adam has already been through something similar before.
Yeah. I know. Unfortunate for him, his previous relationship that he had in New York before he moved to Arizona, she went through breast cancer as well.
Right.
Same double mastectomies, reconstructive surgery, did chemo, radiation, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And it is living and thriving right now as well too, which is
Thank
wonderful.
you for
Like
adding that.
yeah, she made it. She made it, guys. She made it. But yeah, Adam went through all of this and did the caregiver piece, and then here he is doing it again.
Right. Right.
But also two totally different people, his,
Absolutely. I mean, but there's so many factors that go into it. Um,
yeah,
and especially because at this point you haven't started any chemo because you
no,
opted to do the chemo after
yep,
surgery. And so this is the beginning still.
yeah,
And so now, and I would say that cancer and my experience, with chemo, um, and even thyroid cancer is like, get fucking ready to, um, have to shift incredibly fast.
yeah.
Like, and it is this, like, all of a sudden you just get this one bit of news and whatever road
Hmm.
you were on is now clear off
Hmm.
over here. And
Yeah,
you're barfing the whole time.
yeah,
Whatever, so it's like it is this uh by the end, I think for me, it's like, yeah, I was really um, pretty well versed on radical acceptance
Yeah.
of just being like, all right,
Yes.
because at first it's like, wait, what? Wait a second, and then pretty soon you're just like, yeah, you're so used to the changes and kind of, I don't want to say not anything panning out, but it's like, it really is so individual based on the person and what happens to your body in every day.
Yeah.
And so then it's a constant like it's so hard to plan
Hmm.
pretty much anything
Yeah.
because even the
Uh,
planned things are just like chaos sometimes.
Yeah, and you can do your best, which is what I've done, and ask a bunch of questions, plan as much as possible. But the other side too is just trying to manage all of this is like a part-time job.
Yeah.
Managing the insurance, managing the bills that are coming in and making sure things get paid and managing all of your doctor's appointments and all of the follow-ups and the scans and the tests and the labs and da 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 da. Oh, you're on the research that you're doing and you got to make sure you're taking these supplements and the healthy living here and eating this new diet. And I mean, it's an overload and overwhelm. I mean, and I already was like down the path of obviously living a more holistic life. And I thank God every day that I also was healthy and in a good place because I know that that made a huge difference in my recovery from surgery, how I handled chemo next, because I obviously just wrapped up that piece. You know, it's it's so much. It's a lot for any person to have to like handle or deal with. Yeah, it's overwhelming on multiple angles in
Right.
all avenues. And
Well, and I think that a lot of people, as observers of people with cancer, because like you said, I had already kind of been in this place, in this holistic place, and
mhm,
so I don't want to use the word easy, but right, that's a path that can be continued because it's right, like it's
yeah,
not brand new. So it's just kind of like a continuation of that, but I've seen it in where um, there's such a shutdown in people when they get the news.
mhm,
Um, that it's like, kind of that clamp down and that I can't even trust myself in this moment. And so then
yeah,
like power gets handed over to other people because, like doctors and whatever, because we think that they know what's best. And I see situations like that, right, where the person gets
yeah,
lost in that system because they're in such an extreme like state of overwhelm.
yeah,
And, and that's where like fun coping mechanisms can come out,
mhm.
right? And what do we do not to feel? And what do we do
Oh
not
yeah,
to like experience this whole thing? And yeah, I mean, you can see it in the wide variety of human beings that get diagnosed.
yeah,
So, I mean, I definitely applaud you for the route that you took. And I'm sure that there were times where um, you were, I mean, my guess, of course, correct me if I'm wrong, but let me ask this differently. Were there
yes.
times during this process, right, where you find yourself just being like, I'm ready to not make any decisions, like someone take over?
Well, that's a really good question. Oh, that thought never, in that way, it never crossed my mind. But I'll tell you what did. Those thoughts are where you're like, you're just so fucking exhausted and tired. And so there were days and times of that, and like, yeah, I don't want to make another decision today,
Mm-hmm.
but I was never gonna like hand over anything to anyone else
Mm-hmm.
because I knew I had to make the decisions that were going to be best for me, despite of what else I heard. Because like family members, boyfriends, moms, dad, whoever, everyone's like, I think you should do this. I think you should do this. I think you should do this. And it could have been real easy to just be like,
Okay.
okay, Yeah, I'll do what you say. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that's not me. And none of this would be as successful as it's been so far if I would have done that and just hand over my autonomy to
Right.
someone else. Like that was never going to happen. Nope.
Mm-hmm. Well,
No.
and even the other day when you were here and you were talking about your upcoming radiation and you were talking about the amount of sessions that there were going to be,
Yeah.
what was it 33?
Yes.
And you were
That's what,
like 33, but I think I'm gonna just like I'm kind of considering like maybe I should just do half or whatever you said.
yeah.
And Adam said, "Babe, you can't do that. You can't just
You
say
can't
like
negotiate.
you can't negotiate. You can't just order up however many radiation sessions you want." And you said, "Yes, I can.
100%. Yes, I can.
Yes, I can." And I thought that that was like a really beautiful moment because I was like, "Yeah, this
Mhm.
she's not ever gonna do anything that she doesn't want to do."
Mm-mm.
And the cool part is the is that piece of I can still choose whatever I want.
Yes.
I can choose whatever I want and I can say no, right? And maybe I don't have to say can I only get 15? Maybe I say, "Okay, sign me up for 33." And at 15 I say, "I'm
I'm
not coming
done.
anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not coming anymore." Because you can do that and people don't realize that you do have that power. That you can say
Yes.
no to literally anything that they ever offer you. If they come in to do blood
Yep.
work and you don't want to get it done, you can be like, you can come back later. I
Yes.
mean, it really is that was a huge learning curve for my mom and I. Especially because I was a teenager and so there was a lot of the first couple months where we got bulldozed. Um,
Yes.
and my cancer was because it was leukemia, we had no time. So it was like day I found out, um, went to the hospital that day. I was living on Kauai at the time, and so they couldn't treat me there. So I had to fly to Honolulu. So I flew to Honolulu that day, and it all started from the second I
Wow.
walked in that hospital to that was on a Thursday, and my first chemo treatment was on Monday. So it was all the surgeries and all
Wow.
the things like just one right after the other all weekend long. I had like three surgeries that weekend, two were surgeries, one was a procedure that I was awake for, and then chemo started on Monday.
Wow.
And I got three treatments a week for a month to put me into remission. And it was like these big I mean I got really really sick right off the bat. I got all these like like my mouth just like blew up,
Hmm.
mouth sores all the way down my throat, so I couldn't eat it, hives all over my body, just all kinds of wild stuff. um and then it was like month two where all of a sudden my mom's like, wait a fucking second.
Yeah.
I mean, she would have never, my mom's Mormon, she would never say
Yeah.
fucking,
Oh, yeah.
but she's like, wait a second.
Wait a second here.
Wait a second, and we started to realize that like, right, their suggestions come across like needs.
Yes. Yep.
And they're so used to what they do, and rightfully
Mhm.
so. I'm not,
Yeah.
um, and there's a next thing on the protocol for you to do.
Yep. Hmm.
And that's what they're going to suggest. But you do have that time to just say like, no, actually, we're not going to do this. And
Yeah.
we started getting much, much better at that as time went on, even on down to the fact that like I freaking got so sick of the smell of hospital food. Blah! Oh my gosh,
Oh,
they would
yeah.
even bring a tray into my room, I would barf. And so, uh, we learned, of course, after like a week of me puking every day when they bring the tray in, that I can say,
No.
my, don't bring
Yeah.
food in here.
Yeah.
But like we didn't even, right? You don't realize even just tiny things like that, or, saying, no, I'm not going for this test right now. Like
Yeah.
just
I've done,
whatever.
yeah, I've done that multiple times. I've pushed, scans or tests back because I'm like, nope, I don't feel ready. And it's so crazy because like, yeah, like you said, like you can fire your doctor. You don't have to do anything like you don't want to. They're just saying like this is what we want you to do, but they make it sound like it is mandatory and like you have no choice. You
Mm-hmm.
always have a choice.
Yeah.
You can walk out of that doctor's office anytime. you want. And if you decide halfway through treatment, you're like, I'm not doing this anymore and I want to go do something else, you can 100% do
You
that.
can do that. And what's fascinating, and I don't know if this is 100% true. I'm sure there might be a doctor's office out there that is quite beautiful and wonderful and would do this, but most likely, if you were to stop going, you don't get a phone call that's like,
Mm,
"Hey, are you coming back? Are we going to do this?" No, they're
yeah,
moving on to the next patient that's coming in.
yeah.
And I mean, even you know, with my experience with denying my last chemo treatment, where I was just like, no, I'm not getting it. I was super convinced, like you talk about, things that you just kind of like knew.
Yeah.
Um, when I got diagnosed with leukemia, I was never concerned for my life. Like it just never, I mean, I was concerned for my teenage life
Yeah.
because I had to stop playing soccer and
Yeah.
was
Yep.
bald and skinny and no boys liked me and I couldn't go to school. So the teenage life
Yeah.
was what I mourned over far more. I never thought I was at risk um, of death until I got this really, really crazy bad infection after a chemo treatment.
Ooh.
And when that same chemo treatment came around again, and it was supposed to be my last treatment, I told my mom, I said, I'm gonna die. Like I know that this is gonna kill me. Like this chemo treatment's gonna
Wow.
be it, and I don't want to get it. And it was like just this super, like I was convinced that I didn't need it. And I was really lucky that my parents are who they are, and backed me because I was 16. So they could have forced me to
A
do it.
hundred. Yeah. They could
They
have
could have
forced
forced me
you.
to do it. And what was wild about that scenario, right, is that I was on a study.
Mm.
Like everyone gets put on a study when they start a chemo regimen. Like that's what they're going at. They're like, oh, here's this protocol. It's already laid out for us. We're going to add you to the list and we follow this protocol and your data gets entered in, right? It could
Hmm.
be a 5-year study. It could be a 10-year, like you don't know what you're getting put on.
Yeah.
And, uh, and so when I said I didn't want to get it, we had to have this big meeting and we sat in a room. I remember we were like table full of doctors. There's like 5 of them. And then me and my parents sitting on the other side. And it was like scare tactic time. It was
Oh
like
yeah.
all the just awful news about what my
Yep.
chances of remission were, all the, like X-ray, just fear, 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 fear. And
Yep.
I get it. I get it. Um, and then they told me that I was going to get kicked off the study.
Mm.
They were like, if you don't get this last treatment, you're going to get kicked off the study, and other kids with leukemia will not benefit from what happened. Like what all that you've been through is now wiped clean. Like nobody's going to benefit from that. And are you ready to like have that on your conscience? And I was like, well, I mean, I guess, I was just like, I don't care. I don't care. And the funny part is obviously I denied it and I lived and I'm
You're
still
here
here.
today.
I'm still here today, but there's never been like follow up. Like, like once I moved away from where I got cancer treatment, that was it. Like, they don't
Yeah.
call you, they don't check up on you. They're not like, hey, call us in 10 years if you're still alive so we can like mark it on this little paper,
Right?
like anything like that. So, yeah, when I'm sitting in with my endocrinologist and I say, hey, do you think my thyroid cancer is tied to the chemotherapy I had as a kid? And she says, no, it's like, well, no one's ever watched that. And no one's ever
Right?
taken the kid that had leukemia when they were 15 and all the cancer treatments and whatever and followed them until they were 45
Yeah. It's
to
not like you're part of
see.
a longitudinal study that they would allow you to keep staying on.
Well, and like, I always say when I tell the story, I'm like, well, put that in your fucking study,
Yeah.
right? Like, why wouldn't that be something profound?
Hmm.
Um, but that's, I mean, whenever people, especially with ice baths and stuff, people are always asking for the study, the study, the study. And I'm like, well, also let's keep in mind that whoever isn't kind of like fitting in with the study gets kicked off.
Yeah.
And so we lose that data from the person that didn't do the thing, or, there's tons of people that get in ice and never grow brown fat. Those people get kicked out of the study.
Yeah.
It's like, it's fascinating.
Yes. Well, and to your point as well, too, like a lot of the studies I might not also even be applicable to me related to breast cancer because I have a gene mutation.
Right.
And like how many studies are out there that are like specific to my gene mutation with my cancer? Like there's not very many because that's so like niche narrow, I guess. And like they can't study everything all at once, all at the same time.
Right. Right.
And so then, too, when you're sitting in these doctors' offices and they're giving all this kind of stuff, I'm like, well, how does that relate to me? And then also this like gene mutation I have and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, well, you're like,
Well,
well,
we
and
don't
then you
really
don't get
know.
I don't really know. And then you get this a runaround answer that it's not really an answer because they're talking in circles
Hmm.
or won't send you anything. Um, whatsoever. And you're just like, I'm just sorry. I'm not going to blindly follow you just because you said, well, this is what you have to do. That is
Hmm.
not an answer. And
Yeah.
that's also not evidence
Yeah.
or data. Like, yes, great, but like you got to give me everything that backs up what you're saying
Hmm.
because I
Hmm.
have to buy into it. And if you want me to buy in, you got to show me the data.
Right. Which I loved that you did the whole time.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, all your stories that were you're like, yeah, so then I asked this question and they're like,
Yes. I you're like,
uh. That is, and it's really funny because then you found out multiple times that when you push, they don't really have an answer.
they don't. No, not
You're
always.
like,
Sometimes they
this
do.
is fascinating. This is really fascinating. Okay, so we've had surgery.
Yes.
Um, and tell me timeline from when you started going to block.
Okay. Yeah. So I have obviously my doctors here in the cancer network that I'm in. But then I also got introduced by my friend Mindy to this integrative cancer center based out of, well, it's actually in Skokie, Illinois. And it's called the Block Center. And they've been around for over 40 years, like world renowned. And again, like they're more integrative. And so when my friend Mindy told me about them, I was like, well, this actually sounds more in alignment with like who I am and how I live my life. Like it should be integrated. Like there's a place for Western medicine, Eastern medicine, all of it. Like you should be utilizing all modalities to help people. Like Western isn't end all be all, Eastern isn't end all be all the times. Like it should be a nice like relationship that goes like back and forth. You're using all these different modalities. So, um, so my friend Minnie told me about them. I contacted, they're like, yeah, we'd love to take you on as a patient. And so I was like, this is fantastic. And I'll tell you, like leading up into all of this, like in the back of my mind, there was like a part of me that was still like, I'm not getting chemo or radiation. Like there was like a piece of me that was like, I'm not going to need it. It's not going to happen. No, no. And so then I was just kind of like playing, going along. But there was a piece that was just like, that's not going to happen. But after, what happened with surgery, cancer being more advanced than what they thought, I got bumped up to that stage 3. And then obviously like having this, like the gene mutation playing in a factor into everything. I was like, gosh, I might have to really consider chemo. And so then, do I want conventional chemo here in Arizona and which the decision I did make was to go to the Block Center because they do a different kind of chemotherapy. It's called chronomodulated chemotherapy.
Hmm.
And they're the only place in the US that does it. Europe has been doing it for years, and that's where they got it from and brought it to the States. There's like a special kind of device. It's still the same chemo drugs, but like they have to go through this device. I'm not being scientific because I don't know the scientific stuff behind it. This is like my layman's term version of everything that they've told me and like my process of like what it is. So the chrono piece obviously so means time. So there's a timing in the delivery of when I got the meds, but also it was time based off of like my circadian rhythm, my cortisol levels. And so when they were telling me all this kind of stuff, I was like, well, if I have to do chemo, like that actually sounds kind of cool, but also, um, one, their method of the chronomodulated chemotherapy is more effective and then less toxic on the body because of the delivery and the timing of the drugs. So conventional chemo, right? So you're getting the meds delivered at the same pace, like pushed hard
Yeah.
through that
Open up. Here
port.
we go.
Open up, here you go. And it's just like this open flooding, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, obviously, cancer cells get smart. And if they go to sleep, those chemo drugs aren't going to work because when they're turned off, like they're not going to die. That's why chemo cannot be as effective. So, but their chronomodulated chemotherapy that the Block Center does is so it's a slow trickle up and then like a slow trickle down, almost looks like a bell curve. And the timing and the reasoning behind it is they want to trick the cancer so it doesn't go to sleep so that it can kill more cancer cells to be more effective. But because the medicine is also delivered at a slower pace and the timing of it, your body, you're receiving it when your body is at its ultimate prime time to be able to fight.
Hmm.
But also because of like it being delivered at such a slow speed and pace, your body has more time to process the drug coming in. So you tend to have a little bit more mild or side effects. Now, I mean, obviously everybody's body is different. You're not going to know any of that till you get in. But when they're talking about this, I was like, why wouldn't I go to a place that is more effective, but then like less toxic? Like that just to me just like made sense. And the thought of doing conventional chemo here, my body instantly was like, no, this is not for you.
Hmm.
And it 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 was somewhat of a point of contention with Adam and I because in his mind he's like he didn't see the difference of conventional chemo to the chronomodulated. To him, it's all chemotherapy.
Hmm.
So why are you going to go out of your way every 2 weeks to go to Illinois? And he had a hard time like accepting it. Like he didn't get it. He's like, I just don't understand. Like chemo's chemo. And I was like, but it's not. And he sat on one of the telemed Zoom calls with Dr. Nimagata, who's my medical oncologist through the Block Center.
Hmm.
And when she went over like what it is. So he heard it and he heard it from me. But like he's my partner. We're in this life thing together. And I think a lot of his trepidation and like he was one concerned about me having to travel, go do that when he's like, but you could just do it here. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of the doing it here was also that he would also be here to be able to be with me. And I think a lot of it was
Hmm.
he was just afraid and worried for me traveling, every 2 weeks for 8 rounds of chemotherapy, like getting sick and blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
Um, but I told him, I was like, babe, I was like, I appreciate what you're saying, but I know to my core that this is the right decision and this is what I have to do. And if I have to have chemo, this is the way I'm doing it. Like I couldn't do conventional chemotherapy here. Like it just did not sit well. My gut and my heart were like, no, 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 no. And like I mentioned, it was already a hard pill to swallow that I was going to have chemo. But hearing like what the Block Center had to offer, it just made everything like so much easier. And I knew like in my gut, like that was the right decision.
Hmm.
And so I made the choice, and obviously it wasn't easy and I knew it was going to be hard. And I was like, every 2 weeks, I was going to fly to Illinois, be there pretty much. I was there for 2 days total and then come home. And that's what I did. I flew out. So surgery was May 15th. Um, they wanted me to start chemo like super quick. And I was like, wait a second, like I still need to like recover a bit from surgery. Like let me bounce back and get some strength
Yeah.
back, get my body in a good place. And that was the other thing too, where they're like, well, you have to do it in this on this timeline. It's like, nope, I get to do it on my timeline. And so that's obviously also what I did. So I started my first round of chemo in Illinois was what was it, July? It was the end of July, I believe, like the 25th or the 26th. And then every 2 weeks, I'd fly out on a Wednesday. I would go to the block center on Thursday, get chemotherapy Thursday, go back to like my Airbnb to rest because obviously you
Mm-hmm.
feel like shit afterwards. Um, and then Friday morning, I would go back to the block center to get integrative vitamin infusions that were all a part of, like my protocol for like healing and going through chemo, which I got to all do at the same place. Like if I would have stayed here, I would have had to have find another place to go get vitamin
Yeah.
infusions. Like it's not like I was going to get them
Yeah. You're
at,
at the hospital, which
yeah,
I was just thinking and I was like, man, that's so fucking rad that you got that because that's always been a thing that I've said when I look back. I mean, of course, I went through chemo in 95,
yeah,
96, so very different time frame. There were not like IV places on every
right.
corner, anything like that, but they were doing nothing. They were doing nothing to build me back up except medication. And so it was like, because your blood counts drop to like nothing because chemo kills everything. It doesn't just like
Mhm.
seek out your cancer and kill your cancer, it kills all your blood cells. And so I would drop down to like zero white blood count or like really, really low red blood count, low
Mhm.
platelets, like things like that. So they were giving me these little shots. They were tiny and they were called Nepogen and Epogen, and it was supposed to boost white and red blood cell production.
Yes.
And so that's all they were doing in between to like beef me back up for the next
Mhm.
treatment. Because that's really like what the breaks are about
Yeah.
in between chemo treatments
Yeah.
is not that it's because they've figured out how long they need to
Hmm.
wait, right? Because chemo is incredibly damaging to the body. Like, let's
Yeah.
like be honest about what chemotherapy is. And so they're taking you down as low as they possibly can take you before
Yes.
killing you. And
Yes.
then they're trying to build you back up in between. So I'm just getting these things for red blood cells
Hmm.
and white blood cells. But, in the meantime, there's no suggestion for an intake of vitamins of any kind. They're telling my mom, because you're barfing all the time. So they're telling my mom, well, whatever she wants to eat, just let her eat.
Yeah.
So I'm 16, so you can imagine the
Hmm.
healthy choices I make. Although it was kind of like pregnancy for me. Did you find that did you have like cravings?
I did. Yeah.
One of
Yeah.
mine was frozen spinach. Cooked frozen spinach because that's what I grew up on. Like my mom would microwave the frozen spinach
Oh my gosh, that's
and
hilarious.
put lemon on it. And I
Yeah.
went through like a month where that's like all I fucking wanted was this frozen spinach.
Oh, that's hilarious. Mine
Like so weird.
was
Maybe I needed folate. My body was just
maybe.
intuitive.
Yeah. I had a lot of cravings for like sandwiches, breakfast burritos,
Okay.
and fruit, like especially like oranges. Like I've been going
Okay.
to town on oranges.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
That's
But
really
those were like the
interesting.
things that were like it was easy and I knew would always go down because so I had two different chemo drugs. The first drug, which is the one that's coined the Red Devil, which I think like almost everyone gets. It's the most toxic out of all of them. I don't remember like the
Do you
whole
remember what it's called?
advermycin, blah, 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 whatever. It's like AC
Oh,
is,
Aracy.
yeah, that.
Yeah, that's the chemo treatment I denied at the end.
Yeah.
That was part of
So
it. That was part of it.
so I had that for my first 4 rounds, and I had the worst fucking nausea. I never threw up. Like it never got to that level, but it was constant push through
Mm.
nausea, like 24/7. And obviously, like, so I went every 2 weeks, and so it's about after chemo, 5 to 7 days of you're feeling like, and then you had like a week of you're like, oh, I actually feel like pretty good. And then you do like the whole cycle over again.
Mm-hmm.
But I had 5 different prescription meds for anti-nausea alone,
Oh.
and they were
Mm-hmm.
barely cutting it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and the the other thing that helped, honestly, was weed, marijuana, and that was the
Oh yeah.
only way that I could eat anything, keep anything down, but it also helped with a lot of the pain and discomfort that came with, chemo. And also I used it as part of pain management after surgery because I didn't want to be drugged up on a bunch of narcotics. I do not
Mm-hmm.
like those.
Mm-hmm.
I did not want that in my body. And so, you're going the other route, but it's honestly, it worked so well. And it was the only thing that helped me to be able to eat during chemo when you feel gross, you have no appetite, but you need to eat because you need food and nutrition. So you have energy,
Mm-hmm.
build back your body and fight everything that's like going on.
Yep.
So, yes.
Oh my gosh. It's so wild to even hear you talk about it. And it is, it's a fucking crazy process.
Yeah.
And it's kind of Groundhog Day, but like not, right? Because you're just
Yeah.
like recycling, but then, the more treatments you get, it's not,
Hmm.
your body's taking a hit each time.
Yeah.
So you're not, with each one that you start, you're starting at like a little bit of a deficit, kind of like,
Yeah.
because your body doesn't get to recover all the way. Did you get sick at
No.
all? Like, meaning like, where they had to push back any of your treatments?
Nope.
That's
None
good.
of that ever happened. My doctors were always so obviously, so you have to get your labs done before you can get your next round of treatment because if your liver enzymes aren't in a good place, if your kidneys haven't bounced back, and if your red and white blood cell counts are too low, like you can't
Yep.
get treatment because obviously it could kill you because your body can't fight anything. I never had that. My doctors were always impressed with my labs. Like my white blood cell counts, even though I got chemo, still stayed pretty well and bounced back into normal range every time. And they were just surprised. They're like, whatever you're doing, keep doing because your body's handling this really well. And we're giving you a bunch of chemo.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I got a lot.
That's
So
awesome.
I just kept like, well, I knew my body was going to be able to do it because, like I said, I got to a place where I accepted that I was going to have chemo, and I went in with like 100% belief that it was going to work,
Mm-hmm.
and it did. And my body bounced back like well enough, especially getting all of that chemo for what was it? Started the end of July, and my last treatment was on Halloween, October 31st was my last round. But I too also had to they did give me a shot on Friday that helped. It was I forget the name of it, but it was to help like my white and red blood cell counts like bounce back. It had something to do with like your bone marrow or whatever. So I
Mm-hmm.
did get a shot to help. But then, there are also my nutritionist that I had through the block center gave me specific supplements and vitamins to take to help, obviously diet and that kind of stuff. They're like, yeah, since you're going through chemo, try to eat more of this as well too while you're da 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 da. I wasn't going to get that here.
Mm-hmm.
That's their philosophy and that's their model of they're like, yep, you're going to get chemo, but we're not just going to prescribe you a bunch of other prescription drugs without anything else. Like we're helping you with your nutrition, we're helping you with your supplementation. I did way more labs with them because they really wanted to find out how my body worked to tailor the treatment specific to me. Like even though everyone else there was getting chemo, but you know, My supplementation was different than theirs because their bodies are all different.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wasn't, you weren't going to get that here through the Western cancer centers.
Yeah. No, no, you're not. And I mean, I even watched it, with the difference because my
Yeah.
brother-in-law is going through conventional treatment
Yep.
at Ironwood Cancer Center, and there were zero suggestions for supplements, and if anything, um, that was suggested beyond whatever they were going to prescribe,
Hmm.
it was, things like stool softeners and which still are anything like that over the counter is going to be incredibly horrific on the body. Um,
Yeah.
and even still not kind of like attacking what's really needed. I mean, there were no suggestions about, hey, why don't you go to an IV place once a week and get, like an IV. Of course, most of those suggestions were coming from us,
Yeah.
but like, um, even, and it was sad to see some of the things like, one doctor recommending, and being like, hey man, why don't you go to the dispensary and pick up what you can?
Yeah.
To another doctor saying, absolutely not. Like, don't do that. And so it was wild to watch the parallel or the contrast between what
Yeah.
was going on with you and then what was going on fully, like as far as Western medicine um, was concerned. And it was really activating for me, for sure. It was
Yeah.
really hard to watch, but it was from a personal level, like a lot was being brought up personally. But then it's like, man, this is really fucked up.
Yeah.
Like there was some really like really, really um messed up situations and like where you're talking about, well, I have all these prescriptions for like anti-nausea and like I don't want to be in narcotics. And I will say that I think that that's one thing that saved me from getting into drugs because by all means I was a coper um,
Yeah.
as a young adult, but like the narcotics and stuff that they would put me on by the end of cancer treatment, I would refuse all pain meds. I wouldn't let them give me anything for nausea. I wouldn't let them like because it would alter how I felt so much and it would take me days. Like that was probably the first time I experienced a hangover but didn't know it. Just like
Oh,
to feel normal again.
yeah.
Because they give you this medicine like when I would get spinal taps and they would be like, "Oh, we're going to put this in your IV and it's going to make it so that you can kind of feel the pain but you're just like not going to care." And so when you really think about
Mm.
what that means is
Yeah.
we're going to disconnect you from your body.
Yep.
You're going to be kind of aware, but you're not going to be able to do anything about it except lay there because you're so fucking drugged.
Yes.
And I mean, it would take me 2 to 3 days to recover from that medication.
Wow.
And truly, I could still feel the spinal tap. It still fucking hurt. I
Oh,
just couldn't fucking say anything. I was aware the whole time. And so when it came to like hardcore drugs, I was like, I had zero curiosity.
yeah.
I was like, no, I know I don't want to feel that way. I mean, of course, I ended up dissociating on my own later on in life.
Yeah.
I ended up, just completing the job and doing it.
Yep.
I did it medication free. Thank
Yeah.
you. With the help of alcohol, of course. But like,
Yep.
it's like,
Hmm.
it is really wild. And the second you say like, I don't feel well, there's like eight offers, or, oh, we'll just give you this. Oh, it's not even like a pause. Oh, you think you can hang?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think would be best for you right now? Or I have this narcotic. It might, but it's like I had zero curiosity about hard drugs.
Yeah. I think that's one thing too I liked also about the conversations with my care team at the Block Center. It was a conversation and it was a dialogue. And every time I went in, before I even got chemo on Thursday, I either met with the physician assistant. Most of the time it was Jen, the physician assistant. I did obviously see my medical oncologist as well too.
Hmm.
But she would sit there with me for like 30 to 45 minutes going over how I felt the past like 2 weeks since I was just there. Like, how were your symptoms this time? Was anything worse or better? How are you doing? How was your appetite? What were you able to do, not do? And then they would offer suggestions like, well, do you feel like you can push through? Is it at a level of where you need something else? Like that, they offered it. It wasn't like, well, now we're going to give you this.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Mm-hmm.
like, do you want this? Here's another prescription drug that could help with your nausea or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it was always left up to me as my decision. And they're like, oh, well, and if it wasn't that, they're like, well, how about you try taking, mushroom supplements to help your liver enzymes and milk thistle.
That's crazy.
Yes. Um, but everything was offered to me, and then I got to make the decision on whether I wanted to do it or not.
That is
It
so
was a
beautiful.
totally different conversation than when I've gone to see my Western doctors here because I'm also in the Ironwood Cancer Research Center network. And what's great, like there are great doctors, and I'm not,
Absolutely.
I'm not,
Absolutely.
but they were trained in a specific way, and it's a different conversation. They don't spend as much time, you know, and everything is like you have to do this because of the protocol, because this,
Mm-hmm.
not it's like, hey, here's your options. This is what we're suggesting. What do you think, or what do you want to do? It was totally different conversations, and they spent just more time wanting to make sure I was getting the best care, but that everything was tailored to my needs and whatever symptoms I was going through. And it didn't feel like they were trying to push something that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want.
Mm-hmm.
So you had more ownership. I had more autonomy. And I just felt like, and obviously I can't compare because I didn't do conventional. So I don't have a
Mm-hmm.
comparison. I just have the experience. But I'm gonna assume that it obviously went like way better than probably doing conventional chemo here.
Well, I can tell you that I'm like sitting here being like, in the weirdest cancer way, being like, man, that sounds awesome. But I think only people that have had cancer can say weird stuff like that, where you're just like, wow, that sounds like so amazing.
You're like, I wish I would have gotten that.
Isn't that truth? Isn't that truth? Well, so what's next? We're done as of with chemo as of the end of October, and here we are at the beginning of December. So what's
Yeah.
upcoming?
So actually, after we're done with this, I actually have an appointment with my radiation oncologist to talk about radiation. So that is the next phase, I should say, on this journey. I'm not sure when it's going to start or anything like that. Obviously, that's a part of the conversation I have today because I haven't. The last time I met with him was like right after surgery, and that's when he told me I was going to need 33 sessions and da 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 da, which I still think that's a lot. That's 6.5 weeks because you have to go every day for radiation.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
And how long are the treatments for? How long are you doing it?
I don't know. They said it's like pretty quick. Like it doesn't take like that
Yeah, it doesn't
long.
seem like it's a long process.
But yeah, but you have to go every day.
Yeah.
And I don't know how my body is going to react to radiation. I feel like it gets downplayed a lot, because people tend to have more side effects with chemo, but I've also talked to people who had pretty bad side effects from being radiated. And it just seems like it's gets downplayed. And they're like, oh, it's just radiation. It's not that bad. You're like, well, first of all, it's radiation. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's still like not a bad thing in the sense, like you're being exposed to radiation.
Well, like we've all seen and heard stories of people that get exposed to radiation, and
Yeah.
there's evacuation, there's all kinds
Yeah.
of stuff, and that would be just like radiation in the air. We're talking about like actually
Hmm.
physically
Concentrated. Yeah.
concentrated on you. So that's, I mean, I hear you. That's
Yeah.
um do they recommend doing like iodine?
I don't know. Good question. I will
To like
find more out today.
protect your thyroid. That's today?
Yeah, my appointment's after
Did you
we're
say
done.
that? I
Yeah,
skipped that. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was today.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
well,
So I have my follow-up with my radiation oncologist now that I'm done with chemo. So I will have more information on all that kind of stuff. But yeah, here another thing that I've having to come to terms with accepting, but also at the same time, I don't have to do radiation if I decide and I change my mind.
hmm
You know, going back to this, everything is a choice. I don't have to do it.
hmm
I
Yeah.
can choose not to.
And you can change your mind.
I can change my mind. Like you said earlier, too. If halfway through I'm like, I'm done, I can be done.
hmm
And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, they don't send someone to come and arrest you.
No, they definitely do not.
One thing, if you have time that I'd like to
Hmm.
talk about
I do.
is your hair.
Oh, yes.
Um, I'm sure everyone can see that you're bald, and so let's talk about losing your hair and what that's been like.
Yeah. Uh, Obviously, it's not a fun experience to go through. Luckily, I have a nice head that works for being bald. And that was, I think for any,
Gorgeous.
thank you. And I think for anyone, going through it, like you're like, what am I going to look like when I lose my hair?
hmm
You're like, you're already going through cancer. And this makes it very clear that you're going through cancer to the rest of the world, right? Like, you get those looks and stares. People are like, do you have cancer? You're like, yeah, I got cancer. That's why I lost my hair. You're like, what? That doesn't bother me. But people like have those looks. You're like, yeah.
Yeah. hmm
But there was a part of me that it was like, it was hard. And then there was also, I don't know, like some relief that came with it as well too. Um, so it was after my second round of treatment. So again, fly out Wednesday. I flew home on Friday after I got my vitamin infusions at the block center. I would leave Skokie, head back to Chicago and hop on a plane and come back home. And so then I'd have the weekend to rest. So after my second round, I got home Friday night and like my hair was already like falling out. And I knew like that weekend I was going to have to shave it. So I didn't wash my hair for like a few days because you knew like what was coming. You're like, oh, I'm not gonna wash my hair because it's still kind of fine, like right now. And so I just like left
You're
it.
trying to eke it out as long as you
You
can.
do, you try.
You're like,
And
but it
then
kind of looks good today. Kind of.
yeah. So I get up on Saturday morning and Adam, my boyfriend, we had already made the decision like he was gonna shave my head. So I was like, well, let me take a shower first because I hadn't showered yet. And I don't know why I thought to like I needed to wash my hair in the
Before you
shower
shaved it off,
before I
let's
shaved it off,
let's clean you one last time.
which was a terrible idea because all it did was just get everything like natted and knotted.
Oh, because it was like so thin.
Because it
Yeah.
was, yeah. So, and I had it
And it's like
like,
it starts getting this weird chemo texture.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
hmm
So then I get out and it's pretty much just like this weird clump looking thing or whatever. And I was like, I don't know why I decided to wash it when it's coming all off. So I'm in the bathroom and my boyfriend is, for those of you who don't know, he's already bald and he's been bald for years. So he did not shave his head in solidarity with me. He was already there.
He was already there.
And so I sit down in front of the mirror so he can shave my head and I watch as it's happening. And of course, there's like tears running down my face and you're like, you'd never think you're going to be in that position. And then here you are. You're like, it's really happening. losing my hair from chemo, from treatment, and now I have to have it shaved off. And yeah, it was hard, but then there's also some relief that came with it as well too. Like after it was all shaved and I see like, oh, I don't actually like look too bad. But then it's also not as bad as you might have hyped it up to be, I guess.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and another piece to that is well too, and I'll share like I had alopecia as well, so I was already kind of going like my hair was already like thinning on the sides. And so I think a big piece as well too is I didn't have to worry about that because now I lost all my hair because
Mhm.
of chemo. And so then, trying to like cover up the alopecia and stuff like that, like I don't have that to deal with anymore, that's where a lot of the relief came from as well too, which also a lot of people didn't know I was battling with that kind of stuff. So, because I had kept it very hidden, because who wants to have some issue with your hair,
Right.
right?
Right.
So now there's this kind of piece that came along with it because like I don't have any hair, I don't have to worry about like the alopecia, like it's all gone, and so like I can just like breathe and be.
Mhm.
So there's a part of it that's actually really like comforting and nice because of that. Like I don't have to worry about that. So there's like, oh, that's kind of been lifted off my shoulders.
Mhm.
But you're still like every day, you're like, oh, no hair, no hair.
Like, well, that's a stiff breeze
Yeah.
back there.
Yeah. Which is so wild and weird because I have like the little fuzzies right
Yeah, you
now.
feel it like blowing the wind.
Do you feel it when it blows in the wind and it's the weirdest like feeling?
It is so weird. It is so weird. And it's like
Yeah.
it's such a weird, but I hear you. I lost mine like really slowly. And I remember the day they came in and they told me I was going to lose my hair, and they told me they're like, and just be prepared because most people um it'll like come out in clumps like in the shower when you're washing your hair.
That was what's happening
And
to
it'll just
me.
like come out in clumps. So
Hmm.
what I heard as a 15-year-old kid was don't fucking wash your hair. So I was like,
Oh
okay, so it
no.
comes out when you wash your hair. Heard. And so I would just go these like crazy long periods of time without washing it because I'd be so fucking scared to. Because
Yes.
I would just be like, this is it. This is going to be the day that it's all going to come out. And so it came out in these, just this really, really slow process. So finally, my mom, and this is what I mean by like chemo texture. It's like, it gets to this point where it's like worse than gray hair. Like,
Yes.
it's like this really funky texture, which is also just to me, I'm like, yes. And so that signals that your gut is like the major connector to your hair growth.
Yeah.
Um, and so I had, the like baby barrettes
Yep.
that you
Hmm.
would use for like a 1-year-old to like push their bangs off to the side. And
Yeah.
it's just this tiny little like clip. That's literally what I was holding my hair back in this like tiny little ponytail. In the back, there was like
Oh my God.
5 hairs in there, and I would like clip it in this little fucking barrette. Because I mean, I was holding on tight.
You're holding
And
on tight and you were not letting go.
I was holding on tight. I was convinced that everyone was still thinking I had long, luxurious blonde hair. And my mom just came to me one day and she just said, babe, she's like,
Yeah.
it's time. I think it's time to shave your head. Like, are you ready? And I said, sure. And so I refused. I refused to sit in front of a mirror. I sat at the kitchen table
Mm.
and I remember just like sitting there with just like, I wasn't like actively crying. I wasn't like doing anything like this. It was just like streaming, like where
Yeah.
water just like
Yeah.
streams down
Yep.
and you're not really making any noise. And
No.
I remember the sound of the clippers and everything.
Yeah.
And then that like walk into the bathroom to look at it for the first time was just so fucking intense. And I was like, well, of course, in my head, even though it was very obvious that I had cancer beforehand, but I was like, now I like look like I have cancer.
Yes.
And that
Yeah.
was really, really fucking hard for me.
Yeah.
For me, I was just like, man. And I was 16, so a lot of people, want to throw you a compliment about that you have the perfect head for
Yep.
cancer. Just like you're like, well, and I'm lucky, and I
Yeah.
and as a 16-year-old like angsty kid who's like, you know,
No.
anybody that would tell me I had the perfect head, I would just be like,
Yeah.
okay, motherfucker. You
Yeah.
motherfucker.
That has
Um,
been interesting also. You're saying like, oh, you know, you look like, oh, you have cancer. I can't tell you how many I get like the reverse of like, oh, you don't look sick. Oh, you look like you look so great, which I will totally accept those compliments, but it's just so weird because when you think about it, it's like, well, am I supposed to look like a certain way? And because I think you see a lot of other people going through cancer who do look really fucking sick.
yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
and who really, I mean, we all are in a sense, but it's I think some people have just been like, oh, whoa, just like surprised or caught off. Like, you just look so great. Oh, you look at
Hmm.
all this energy you have. And you're like, and to me, and yes, it might appear like that, but it's not the same energy that I had before.
Right. Right.
And it's not the
And
same this that I had before.
and when I'm at the grocery store, I'm still kind of like putting it on a little bit. So I'm
Yeah.
not gonna be walking around like I mean, maybe if the day was bad enough, I might be walking around crying and like leaning on my shopping cart, but if I'm gonna be out in public, I'm gonna also be kind of mm, like displaying a different
Yeah.
person
Put
on
your
the
game face
outside.
on, your game face on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really loved, and I do this all the time too. And I think as soon as he started asking you about your head when we were at Benny Blanco's, I was like, he's definitely had cancer before because
Yeah.
nobody asks like he does unless you've had
Yes.
cancer. So,
Hmm.
like, and he said, can I ask you a personal question or what, how did it, he's like, can I ask
Yeah,
something
he did. Yeah. He's
personal
like,
or,
hey, can I ask you a personal question? And I was like, yeah,
yeah,
sure, too.
yeah. So he kind of like checks in, but it's kind of in this like excited tone.
Right?
Because he's kind of like, I kind of already know, but I'm just gonna like double
Yeah.
check, and I kind of want to just be like, hey, cancer buddy, high five, like good
Right?
for you. And here I am, and I had it at such a young age, and I made it, and I just like
Yep.
kind of want to share this experience, and because as soon as he asked you, and you're like, yeah, I mean, you can tell that already you know what's coming, but he's like, why the bald head? He just
Yeah.
comes right out, and you're like, yeah. And a lot of people are so scared to ask those kinds of questions, but it's like I would much rather answer that question than have you stare at me like I'm a weirdo.
Yes. Yes. Right? Just come up and ask.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think most people are kind of I'm sure that there are some people that are dicks about it. But I think most people really like to talk about what they're going through. And
Yep. Because everyone knows someone at this point. Like you can't, I haven't met a person who doesn't know someone who had cancer or they had it themselves.
mhm.
I mean, we talked about that earlier on during this conversation of you can't throw a stone and not hit someone that either is going through cancer, went through cancer, or has a family member.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just
Mhm.
so pervasive now. So, like, yes, let's have conversations about it. Ask people questions because I
Mhm.
still think a lot of stuff needs to still be talked about or have greater conversations about because we're not talking about it enough.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that there's a lot of about it that people don't know, because like I said, you see the Breast Cancer Awareness Month
Yeah,
where we just kind of parade around
pink everywhere.
pink everywhere and show all the pictures of the smiling bald women
Hmm.
and um and then have like the one survivor come out and give a talk or whatever, but we don't discuss like what all transpires throughout the middle, the absolute emotional turmoil that it is, that because it's somebody getting sick, right? That's a huge activation on like multiple nervous systems.
Yeah.
And that brings up generational trauma from anyone about how do you handle when
Yeah.
someone's sick?
Yes.
Like, can you be a caretaker? Can you be empathetic? Can you,
Hmm.
if you came from a family that, gave you a bunch of meds and sent you off to school and yelled at you for being sick, like that's a It's a
Mm-hmm.
hard thing to navigate. It brings up a lot for people,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
me included.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I've never been one to really be sick. And I'll use like sick in like loose terms because I don't look at myself as being sick in that sense, I
Yeah.
guess. But you know what I'm saying. But I've, outside of having, let's see, I had chicken pox as a kid. I had one major surgery. I had knee surgery at 17. And I'm mainly like getting like a cold, flu here and there or whatever. But like, I hardly ever got sick.
Hmm.
I mean, again, going back to I like lived a pretty healthy, clean life. And then you're thrown into this and like prescription meds and all these doctor's appointments and scans. And I'm like, I've never, it was a whole new world for me to go through all of this and having to see all these doctors when I did my preventative stuff that I needed to every year. And I just wasn't a high utilizer because I didn't have any chronic diseases or anything else, like
Hmm.
little stuff here and there, Oh, went to the ER after a car accident for a concussion and stuff like that. But like that's it. And then now all of a sudden you're thrown into the deep end,
Yeah, like way deep end.
way deep end, and sink or swim.
Hmm.
And of course, like I'm gonna fucking swim.
Yeah.
And I've been swimming the whole time. And that's like the only option. But also I'll say, like, I made that choice and I'm gonna do whatever I can to fight and then have positive, make the best decisions. But at the same time, it's been really fucking hard. There's those days, even if you're in the best mindset and already were in a good place, and then you were thrown this like ugly diagnosis and everything that comes with it, like their days are going to be fucking hard where you just cry. You're sad for like no reason or all the reasons. And you have those moments, of course, of where I was like, why me? Right.
Hmm.
And yes, there's like lessons in all of this. And, this, I do believe that everything happens for a reason. And like no one should get cancer, but there's a reason behind it. And some of the stuff I've shared of what my spirit guides have told my friend Agnieszka that knowledge was imparted on me. But there's just days where you're just like, this shit fucking sucks. Why me? And like, yeah, I'm still gonna feel all the feels. Like I'm not like pushing stuff aside because
Hmm.
I was real good at doing that. You're like, oh, we're gonna put that in Pandora's box because we're not dealing with that today.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you had all of that stuff works until a point, till it doesn't anymore. But I also knew going through this, like I have to feel all the feels. I have to process everything because I do believe the trauma we experience that gets unresolved, the constant levels of stress, whatever
Hmm.
else, I do believe that that kind of stuff will manifest in physical diseases. And I
Absolutely.
100% believe that cancer is one of them.
Hmm.
So there was a reason why I got breast cancer. I mean, multifaceted, whatever. And I knew like, all right, I have to feel everything. I got to process everything to the best of my ability, like eyes wide open, heart wide open, because if I don't, then none of what I do is going to work.
Hmm.
None of the treatments or anything. Like I come to a place of acceptance, even though it's hard, but doing what I needed to and having that belief that the decision I'm making, the treatments that I'm going to do are 100% going to work. If any of those are faulty, then you go down the say I didn't have 100% belief and I went into chemo, I was not going to have the outcome that I had
Hmm.
of where it was successful. I technically don't have cancer. Like the la I did, I haven't done my follow-up PET, but I did a Signatera test, which I've had twice now, and I did that during chemo, and then I had it again at the end. And so the Signatera test is you just draw blood, and they test to see if there's tumor DNA, like cancer tumor DNA in your blood.
Hmm.
And both of those came back non-detected. So like I'm technically right, like no cancer,
Hmm.
but if I wouldn't have gone in with the mindset that I did and the beliefs that I did, who
We don't know.
knows? We don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Um, that's beautiful. I love your outlook, and 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 you're right. There is no way to that there's not going to be days where it's incredibly hard. And as you were talking about, I remember a time where my aunt was visiting, and her and I was in the hospital, but she was joking around with me, and I had been laughing.
Yeah.
I had been laughing, and then I don't know, like 5 minutes went by, and she said something as a joke, and I don't know what it was, but it just fucking hit, and I just bawled my eyes out. I mean, just all of
Yep.
a sudden, it was like there was no stopping. It was just a waterfall, and she felt so bad. She was like, and it wasn't her. I don't know what it was in the moment.
Yeah.
Like it just the dam broke, and there it was
Yes.
with whatever I'd been holding on to up until that point. And um, it's important. And I like that you brought up, well, I've already done the shove down thing. I already know it doesn't work. So, kind of now that I'm in this situation, as much as I'm going to be positive, I'm also going to recognize my quote unquote negative feelings as a window as well,
Yeah.
right? It's there just for the exact reason. And if I'm throwing a blanket that everything's okay and I don't have to look at that and I don't have to address that, like that's going to fester somehow.
Oh, yes.
And the body doesn't like to be ignored. It'll
Nope.
it will it'll let you for a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to get real loud and it's going to get real
Yes.
obnoxious. And you know, you talk about emotions and things like that, like and how they can affect our bodies. And I joke about Red Bull and things like that for my thyroid, or chemotherapy affecting it. I'm sure those things play a role, and just environment and all that. But if I look at what was going on in my life at the time,
Yeah.
I was like 100% shoving everything down. I'm 100% a people pleaser. I'm 100% not
Yeah.
um using my voice and being authentic. I'm being 800 people in one day. Uh um and um drinking and smoke, like I mean, just there were all these things that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like. I wasn't able to look at the time, just like, oh, why is this happening? It's like, well,
Yeah.
there were, just like you said, I mean, if I really think about it, I can be like, yeah, I mean, I can see where it all comes from. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
um, Emotionally, kind of.
Yes.
I'm like, yeah, if I really look at that thyroid cancer, I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't really sit there and be like, I don't get it.
Because your body knows and
Yeah.
it was telling you, but you weren't awake to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm just,
Yeah.
but when I think about it now, I'm like, oh yeah, I was pretty much doing all the things to like make sure I was gonna get something,
Yes.
that something was gonna happen. But yeah, to wrap it up, um, because you and I met because through ice baths, and that was a
We
huge
did.
part of your life prior to.
Yes.
And then, if it's okay,
Yeah.
because we've had a couple sessions
Yes.
since then.
Mm-hmm.
The one that we were joking about the other day at at Women's Circle, where you had a crowd of people like staring
Oh,
at you,
yes.
in support, of course, but then
In
it's kind of
support.
like this,
Yeah.
kind of like this. Why is everyone watching me?
Yeah.
And then we just did one last weekend, and it's an impactful experience for me to watch you in there and feel you in there, um, in comparison to what it was like before, right? Where Tiff could get in an ice bath and like it would be like bust out like 5 minutes like it was nothing. Like just
Yep.
total, just calm, just like sit there. And then especially the one just on Thanksgiving. That one was really um can you describe, I mean, I don't want to say more? I mean, I know you're kind of okay, but
Yeah.
can you describe what that difference, because what really came up, and I just finally said out loud, I'm like, this is a whole new body. This is a whole new body.
Yeah. So yeah, Adam and I were like consistently doing like ice baths like on the regular almost every day. Um, and then so the last time I had done it was before surgery and until like these two recent times. So there's like a huge gap. And obviously I wanted to get back to cold plunging. There was a lot of fear because I was like, a lot's happened to my body. I've been through surgery, now chemo. One of the first one I did was actually still in the middle of chemo
Yeah.
at that women's circle. And it was both times were so fucking hard and I didn't think like it was going to be that hard. Like the fight or flight was crazy, which wasn't for me before. I couldn't get settled in. Like it just felt so much colder than it did before.
Hmm.
And a lot of this, yeah, there's this fear sitting there of like, what's going to happen or what's been happening with my body. And, like you building all of this up. And, um, sorry, this is just, a lot happened in getting back into cold plunging. And then when we did it on Thanksgiving for Ice Church, and I knew it was going to be difficult, but I didn't think I wasn't going to be able to get all the way in, trying to get all the way into my neck. Like I sat like and sitting on like on the backs of my feet and legs because I couldn't get all the way down. And I was just like stuck. And then all these emotions came up, which prior I wasn't one where like a lot of emotions came up during like cold plunging. And there were just like tears running down my face and I just kept telling myself like I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And I was able to do that like but I don't it was just real fucking hard, harder than I thought it was ever going to be to get back in. And you think like, well, I'll just get back into it like I did before.
Hmm.
And perfectly what you said is like I have a whole new body, between the surgeries and the chemos. Like, yes, it's still the same like shape and form for the most part, but it's a lot of it is new. And in this like treatment, healing, recovering, recuperating phase as well, too. And everything's different. And it's not gonna, and obviously it wasn't the same, getting back into it. I just didn't think it was gonna be as fucking hard as it was.
Hmm.
But also at the same time, like it makes sense.
Right. Right. It was a, it was, I don't know how to describe it. It was like a real experience
Yeah.
to watch you in there. Um, I think, and especially in group plunges and stuff, people can get real performative and just like, well,
Yeah.
I know that I can, especially if there's a lot of people around, and then I'm like, well, I'll for sure get in today, like, and
Yeah.
get all the way in, and you're not gonna have it, like whatever. And so it was this real experience. And I would even say that for being the person on the outside of the tub, in contrast to times before, that it was a far more like vulnerable
Yes.
experience. It was almost
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
um, I mean, and obviously our body kind of it carries everything in there. Um, but it's really profound experience for me to watch and feel and to see you in there in that moment, of such emotion where,
Yeah.
right, that normally doesn't come up when you're in there. Um, and what a different kind of power that is.
Yeah.
You know, I think that especially in plunging, people see the successful plunge, you know, Tiffany
Hmm.
plunging for 5 minutes and she's just cool and chatting and laughing and doing all the
Yeah.
things. And it's like, oh, I want to get there. Like, I want to get to that. You know, a lot of people think that, or, um, and I hear that feedback quite a bit. Well, I just want to be able to like sit in there for 3 minutes without making an expression. And it's like, okay,
Okay. Yeah.
right. But the true ice bath is to be present, in my
Yes.
opinion, is to be present with who you are in that moment. And if whatever state your body is in that day, it could be a super stress state, it could be doing
Hmm.
really well, you're always going to have a different experience. And to embrace the experience that you're actually having
Yeah.
is like true power in that tub,
Yes.
is true power in that tub. And so I, after seeing you, you know, plunge many times for 5 minutes, and be totally fine. The ice church was the most impactful
Yeah.
plunge that I've ever seen you do. Like where um, I mean, and really, I was just thinking like that is true strength right there.
Hmm.
And a lot of people don't, you know, they think, oh, well, you know, I have tons of people get out of an ice bath. And if, you know, they stop here, they don't go all the way under, or they would, you know, whatever. It's like the critical self-talk that comes afterwards is, you know, that kind of like the I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I
Hmm.
couldn't make it, I couldn't whatever.
Hmm.
And I try to tell people all the time that that's not the measure of strength in that moment.
No.
Measure of strength is fully listening to yourself and being present with what's actually going on, expressing what you need to express in there, and getting out when you need to get out.
Yeah.
Like getting in however deep you want or whatever's called for, and getting out when you need to get out.
Yes.
And um, I just saw all of that transpire in that ice bath. And I was also, you know,
Yeah.
there's like concern because I know you
Yeah.
and I know what your previous plunge routine is. So I'm like, oh God, I hope she's not comparing herself to herself,
Um,
which
I
is,
think that happened after the first one, at the one women's circle, but there was that comparison of like, oh, I could be able to do this, but then I had to get to that place of like, you just went through, you have cancer, you just had surgery,
mm-hmm,
you know, you're in the middle of like chemo. But I will agree with you. I do feel like the one that just happened was more transformative because I think I felt that one a lot more than I did plunging at that women's circle. Because it was also different too, because I had all these women that were there like watching me and supporting, but I couldn't fully be in it too because a part of me is you're like, I have all these eyes on me like right now.
mm-hmm,
Or like at Ice Church, people, there were a few people there, but having other conversations, and it was
yeah.
really just, I
They're not
mean,
watching the
you came
cancer,
over. They're not,
they're
yeah,
not watching
right.
the cancer kid take an ice bath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, and also a lot of getting to a place where I could get back into the tub. I, I also had to get to a place where I could get comfortable being in some kind of swimming suit. Because let's circle back, surgery did not go as planned. I'm totally flat. So then to have to go put on a swimsuit and make it very obvious that you could see, because a lot of the stuff I wear now is a little bit looser and baggy. Like I'm not wearing tight shirts.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so getting into a swimsuit makes it very real and very clear.
Yeah.
And that I had to get to a comfortable place where I could even get into a swimsuit in to get into a tub in front of people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that took a bit.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's not just the getting into the cold plunge tub. I was like, I knew I could eventually do that, but I'm like, I wasn't ready to be in a swimsuit in front of people,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And it's hard when it's all other women and I'm there going through what I'm going through and just lost boobs, and then you see other women in swimsuits with their boobs.
Yeah.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that was real fucking hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet. Well, and especially, I bet it would also be hard if you heard them complain about it. Or at
Yeah.
least I would say it was. I remember, um, especially because I was in high school, right? So I'm sitting there as a bald kid, but my best friend is doing her hair at my house and complaining about how she hates her hair. And I'm like,
At least you have
motherfucker.
fucking hair. Yeah.
Which of course you can't do that all the time. Like she
Yeah.
has her right to have her experience and be
Yes.
frustrated with her hair, and she doesn't have to like have zero frustration because she has a bald friend. Like,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we know all this stuff, but it's affronting,
Hmm.
and it's just stuff that you got to be like, okay, here's
Yeah.
another layer of things another layer of things to work on.
Yep. But there's also like this, I guess, too, you, I don't know, maybe this is just me as well. It's you have cancer and like you're going through all these things. So on some level, it's like it's easier to accept because there's a reason, like, oh, it's because of the cancer. Like, oh, I lost my hair because of cancer. Prior to that, like I spent a lot of time like in fear and anxiety because of like, I had alopecia and was starting to like lose hair and going thinning, where everything, I'm worried about like, oh, is someone going to see, blah, blah, blah. You're having to hide. And then now there's like this kind of like freedom that comes with, well, like, well, I already lost all my hair. Oh, because of chemo. No, because I have cancer. So, like it makes it somewhat easier. Maybe because also like, oh, everyone like so many people that have cancer, so it's like this stuff that comes along with it. So maybe it's easier to digest instead of if I didn't have it, then like all the hair stuff for and just being for example, what it I guess not as easy to accept or you're more afraid of it or other people finding out because it's quote unquote not as acceptable in that sense of like, oh, you're like your hair stuff. I don't know. Is that making any sense? It might not be
Mm-hmm.
making any
No, it
sense
totally
of what I'm
makes
saying, but
it
okay.
makes sense to me. It makes sense to me.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, well, Tiff, I love you so much. And
I love you so much.
thanks for doing this.
Of course.
And maybe post radiation, we can do a follow up,
Yeah, I would love to do a follow-up.
see how you're doing and what radiation was like and what you did to prepare for that. Um, to end it up,
Yes.
um, let's say, what would someone starting out on this journey, so to speak, what would be some words for them that you wish you maybe would have known at the beginning of yours?
Hmm.
Or
Uh,
that you just wanted to know in general. I mean, it doesn't have to be what you wish you knew.
yeah. Um, I think I'm I think this is for anyone going through anything, whether it's cancer or not. I really feel like you have to trust your gut and go with the decisions that feel right for you and don't make decisions based on what your partner says or your mom says or your brother says or your sister or your best friend. Like you really have to make the right decisions that are best for you and your family will understand. And if some people don't, well, that's their problem and not yours. Like it's your cancer or your disease, whatever it is. And you have to do what's best for you and make the right decisions for you. And you're not going to know if it's right or wrong. Like you just have to go with your gut and make the decision that you feel is best. And you can accept and listen to what people have to say, but don't lose your autonomy. Ask as many questions as possible. And there's no silly or stupid questions. And if you get pushed back from your doctors, then they're not the right doctor. Fire them and go find someone else. I mean, it's not always that easy, but like in the sense, like it is like There are
It is that
so
easy,
many
actually.
options out there. There are so many resources and there is so much information. Do not be afraid to ask questions. Do not be afraid to go and research and bring stuff up. And I think that is the biggest thing because it could have been real easy to just say yes to whatever my doctor said. It could have been real easy to just be like, all right, I'm just going to do whatever you say and just sit back and be along for
Mm-hmm.
the ride.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anything good comes of that.
No.
I think you have to be the driver, get into the driver's seat. It is your life and it's your body.
Mm-hmm.
And you've
Mm-hmm.
been living in it. That doctor knows you for however long,
Right. Right.
and just
Absolutely.
listen to your gut and your heart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Fun question at the end. I know we've talked about this before, but just for everybody that's listening,
Yes.
who was your first celebrity crush, Tiff?
First celebrity crush.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, now I got to go back to
First celebrity
childhood.
crush. Let me just tell you who mine was.
Yes. Okay.
Hopefully, it'll kind of give you an idea because I was probably like seventh grade. And my first poster was Luke Perry.
Oh
Perry,
yeah.
Dylan McKay. He was in all denim. He had like a denim shirt on and
Yes.
jeans, and the background is blue. It was like the bluest poster in the whole wide world, and that was on my wall. I had a very intense crush on Dylan McKay.
I definitely had a crush on him, but the first one that comes to mind that probably was a big one, and I did have a poster that came out of the 17 magazine where you had that.
Yes!
So I had a huge crush on Nick Lachey from 98 Degrees.
Oh, hell yes.
I mean, I had 98 degree posters like all over my wall. I was like obsessed. I would say that would have to be my first like real big celebrity crush
Oh my
as a
gosh. Oh,
teenager,
I love Nick Lachey still to this day. Um,
right?
do you want to hear a funny Nick Lachey story really quick?
Yes, of course.
So I have a friend who used to work at this very fancy spa down, and she's the beverage director there. And Nick Lachey and his wife were staying there. And it was
Stop.
his birthday, and so somebody had called in and ordered like this crazy fancy special bottle of champagne that needed to be delivered to their um, suite, you know,
Yeah,
house that they were staying in on the property.
yeah.
And drives her little golf cart over there. Anyways, his wife answers the door and is like, "Hey, why don't you come in?" And so she walks in with this bottle of champagne, and it's in the winter time. And so Nick is standing. It's these really cool like houses that you can stay in there, and just
Yeah.
obviously all like the floor to ceiling sliding glass doors that you can just keep
Yes.
opening and opening. And that's all just on one side. And he's standing there she's like, it is like high school 98 degrees Nick Lachey that I'm looking at. He has a backwards hat on, he has a
Shut
wife
up.
beater, and he has like Adidas snap pants on. So she's like, I'm literally, and the funniest part is my friend is a lesbian, and she's like in this mode where she's like, I'm standing here, I'm looking at 90s Nick Lachey. Like, it is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Yes.
And he says, oh my God, because it had snowed in Tucson. So there's snow on the mountains, and he's looking at the snow. And he says, I had no idea that it snowed down in Tucson and that it would get this cold here. And my friend Ty says, his wife goes, yeah, but it's always 98 degrees in here, and like points at him. I was like,
My
no.
God, I would have
She's like,
died. I would have
I said,
died.
what did you do? What did you do? She's like, oh my gosh, I was just standing there, like trying to be super professional and like just trying to like breathe and be like, yeah, totally. And she's like, I leave the house and I'm like, holy shit, I can't believe that just happened. Like, oh my God, that's so crazy. Because she's just like,
Oh,
it's always 98 degrees in here.
oh my God, I would have died.
I was like, I don't know. I mean, I am having the same reaction. I mean, I was sitting there. I'm just like freaking dying and freaking out. Her just telling me this story and me just picturing that it's happening. I can't even imagine if I would have been the person
Right?
standing in the room.
Right? Oh,
I'm like, and he had a wife beater on?
and the backwards hat. Oh, done. I
As like
mean,
his uniform.
that was his uniform. Oh, that
Nick
brings back
Lachey's a good one.
memories. Oh my God.
Nick Lachey is a good
Yes.
one. Oh, when they did the hardest thing video and he was
Oh
like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
TRL,
Yep.
TRL. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Tiff. I'm gonna end this and we're gonna chat for like 1 second. But
Okay.
thank you so much for being on, and I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.